The Abilene Paradox is a phenomenon in which a group of people collectively decide on a course of action that none of them individually prefer. It arises from a failure of communication, where individuals mistakenly assume that their personal desires are contrary to the perceived desires of the group. As a result, they go along with a decision that nobody truly wants, leading to dissatisfaction and frustration. The paradox originates from a story told by management expert Jerry B. Harvey in 1974. In this story, a family in Texas decides to take a trip to Abilene on a hot summer day. Each member agrees to go, assuming the others want to, only to discover later that none of them actually wanted to make the trip. They all preferred to stay home but did not express their true feelings, fearing disagreement or conflict. This misalignment between individual preferences and group decisions is at the heart of the paradox. The Abilene Paradox is often mistaken for groupthink, but they are distinct concepts. Groupthink occurs when members of a group prioritize harmony and consensus over critical thinking, leading to irrational or dysfunctional decision-making. In contrast, the Abilene Paradox involves individuals privately disagreeing with a decision but remaining silent, believing they are alone in their dissent. This creates a situation where everyone conforms to a decision based on a false belief about what the group wants. The paradox has significant implications in various settings, including business, politics, and personal relationships. In corporate environments, employees may agree to strategies they believe are flawed simply because they assume management or colleagues support them. This can result in wasted resources, ineffective policies, and frustration among team members. In politics, leaders may pursue policies they believe are unpopular with the public, but mistakenly assume that others support them, leading to decisions that do not reflect the will of the people. In personal relationships, individuals might agree to plans or commitments they do not enjoy because they believe their partners or friends want them, only to later realize that no one truly wanted them. A key factor contributing to the paradox is the fear of conflict or rejection. People often hesitate to voice dissenting opinions due to concerns about social cohesion, respect, or maintaining a positive image. In hierarchical structures, subordinates may be reluctant to challenge superiors, assuming that their input will be unwelcome or that their disagreement might have negative consequences for their careers. This reluctance creates a cycle where silence reinforces the illusion of consensus, making it harder for individuals to break free from the paradox. Another element at play is the assumption that others have better information. People may defer to perceived authority figures or assume that the majority knows something they do not. This form of social proof can lead to decisions that appear unanimous but are actually based on false premises. The fear of standing out or being the sole voice of opposition further discourages individuals from speaking up. Breaking free from the Abilene Paradox requires open communication, active listening, and a culture that encourages dissent. Leaders and group members must create an environment where individuals feel comfortable expressing their true preferences without fear of judgment. Encouraging honest dialogue, questioning assumptions, and seeking clarification can help uncover hidden disagreements and prevent collective mistakes. One effective strategy is to conduct anonymous surveys or use structured decision-making processes that allow for confidential input, reducing the pressure of social conformity. Encouraging a devil's advocate approach, where someone is designated to challenge decisions, can also help mitigate the paradox. By institutionalizing dissent, organizations and groups can normalize the expression of differing opinions and ensure that all viewpoints are considered before making a decision. Additionally, fostering a culture that values transparency and direct communication can prevent misunderstandings that lead to unwanted outcomes. Personal responsibility plays a crucial role in overcoming the paradox. Individuals must recognize their own role in perpetuating collective misjudgments and take the initiative to express their true opinions. This requires self-awareness and the courage to question assumptions about what others want. By developing assertiveness and critical thinking skills, people can avoid falling into the trap of silent compliance and contribute to more authentic decision-making. The Abilene Paradox is a powerful reminder of the complexities of human communication and decision-making. It illustrates how unspoken fears and assumptions can lead to collective actions that serve no one's interests. By fostering open dialogue, encouraging dissent, and challenging false consensus, individuals and organizations can make more informed and satisfying choices. Recognizing and addressing the paradox is essential for improving group dynamics, ensuring effective decision-making, and ultimately avoiding unnecessary trips to metaphorical Abilenes in life. Understanding the psychological mechanisms underlying the Abilene Paradox can further clarify why it occurs so frequently. Cognitive biases such as pluralistic ignorance, social desirability bias, and false consensus effect contribute to the misalignment of perceived and actual preferences. Pluralistic ignorance occurs when individuals mistakenly believe that their private views are different from those of the group, leading them to conform unnecessarily. Social desirability bias causes people to suppress their true opinions to maintain a favorable image within the group. The false consensus effect makes individuals assume that others share their views even when they do not, reinforcing the illusion of agreement. The consequences of the Abilene Paradox can be severe, especially in high-stakes environments such as healthcare, military strategy, and corporate decision-making. In healthcare settings, medical professionals may agree to treatment plans they privately question, assuming their colleagues support them. This can lead to ineffective or even harmful patient care. In military strategy, history provides examples of operations where leaders went along with plans they secretly doubted, fearing dissent would be perceived as weakness or insubordination. In business, executives may implement strategies that no one truly believes in, resulting in financial losses and damaged reputations. To address the paradox effectively, organizations must implement structured decision-making frameworks that promote honest discussions. Techniques such as pre-mortem analysis, where teams anticipate potential failures before making decisions, can help uncover hidden concerns. Encouraging leaders to express vulnerability and admit uncertainty can also set a precedent for open communication. Rewarding individuals for speaking up rather than punishing dissent can transform organizational culture and lead to better outcomes. Individuals can take steps to overcome the Abilene Paradox in their personal and professional lives by developing emotional intelligence, improving communication skills, and practicing assertiveness. Self-reflection can help identify situations where they have conformed against their true preferences. Practicing expressing dissent in low-risk situations can build confidence for more significant decisions. Learning to ask clarifying questions such as, "Is this what everyone truly wants?" can help prevent misunderstandings before they escalate into collective misjudgments. Recognizing the paradox in everyday life can lead to more satisfying and authentic interactions. Whether in workplace meetings, family decisions, or social outings, individuals can challenge assumptions and create a culture where genuine preferences are respected. The more people become aware of the Abilene Paradox, the more they can prevent unnecessary compromises and foster environments where honest opinions are valued. Buridan's ass is a philosophical paradox that illustrates the problem of free will, decision-making, and determinism. It is named after the 14th century French philosopher Jean Buridan, although he never explicitly formulated the paradox himself. The scenario involves a hypothetical donkey placed exactly midway between two identical piles of hay. Since both options are equal in every way, the donkey has no rational basis to choose one over the other, leading to paralysis and ultimately starvation. The paradox highlights the limitations of purely rational decision-making in situations where there is no distinguishing factor between choices. It raises questions about whether free will exists in a deterministic universe and whether rational agents can make choices when faced with perfectly balanced alternatives. This idea has been explored in philosophy, economics, artificial intelligence, and behavioral science, demonstrating its relevance across multiple disciplines. One of the key lessons of Buridan's ass is that indecision can be just as harmful as a poor decision. In real life, individuals and organizations often face situations where they must choose between nearly identical options. If they become paralyzed by analysis and fail to act, they may suffer negative consequences, much like the starving donkey. This concept is particularly relevant in business, politics, and personal life, where hesitation and overthinking can lead to missed opportunities and stagnation. From a philosophical perspective, the paradox challenges the idea that human decision-making is purely rational. It suggests that, in cases of perfect symmetry, some non-rational factor, such as instinct, randomness, or external influence, must intervene to break the deadlock. This has implications for debates about free will, as it suggests that purely logical reasoning is insufficient to explain human behavior. If people were bound by deterministic rules, they might struggle to make decisions in perfectly balanced scenarios, yet in reality, humans do make choices, indicating the presence of some non-deterministic factor. The paradox also has applications in economics and game theory. In markets, consumers may face nearly identical products or investment opportunities. If decision paralysis occurs, it can lead to inefficient outcomes, where people fail to act in their best interest due to excessive deliberation. Companies and marketers often introduce small differentiating factors, such as branding or incentives, to nudge consumers toward a choice and prevent decision fatigue. Understanding Buridan's ass helps businesses design strategies that guide customers toward making decisions without overwhelming them. In the field of artificial intelligence, the paradox raises important questions about how machines make decisions. If an AI system encounters two equal options, should it select one randomly, or should it incorporate some bias to prevent paralysis? Practical AI solutions often use randomized algorithms or slight variations in input weighting to avoid indecision. This demonstrates how even highly rational systems must account for real-world imperfections to function effectively. Psychologically, the paradox relates to the concept of decision fatigue, where individuals become mentally exhausted from making too many choices, leading to avoidance or irrational decision-making. People frequently experience Buridan's ass moments in everyday life, such as choosing between two similar restaurants, job offers, or products. Understanding this phenomenon can help individuals and organizations develop strategies to overcome decision paralysis by setting deadlines, establishing criteria, or delegating minor decisions. One way to resolve the paradox in practice is to introduce an external motivator or arbitrary rule. For instance, if the donkey were nudged toward one pile of hay, it would eat rather than starve. In human decision-making, individuals can overcome paralysis by imposing self-imposed rules, such as choosing the first available option, flipping a coin, or setting a time limit. These mechanisms allow people to make choices efficiently without overanalyzing trivial differences. Another approach is to recognize that no two options are ever truly identical. Upon closer examination, one choice may have subtle advantages over the other. By training oneself to look for these differences, decision paralysis can be reduced. Businesses use this technique by introducing minor variations in product features, pricing, or presentation to make one option appear superior. Buridan's ass also has implications in political science, particularly in electoral behavior and policy-making. Voters may struggle to choose between two similar candidates or policies, leading to voter apathy and disengagement. Political strategists often emphasize key differentiating factors to encourage participation and prevent indecision. Similarly, policymakers must avoid overanalyzing options to the point of inaction, as delay can lead to stagnation and unaddressed societal issues. The paradox also serves as a cautionary tale in personal relationships and career decisions. People may hesitate between two equally appealing job offers, romantic partners, or life paths, fearing that choosing one means losing the other. However, indefinite hesitation can result in lost opportunities and dissatisfaction. Recognizing that no choice is ever completely risk-free or perfect can help individuals make decisions with confidence and move forward. Historically, variations of Buridan's ass have been used in theological and philosophical debates. Some scholars have argued that divine intervention or external forces must guide decisions when reason alone is insufficient. Others believe that the paradox highlights the human ability to introduce subjective value into decision-making, proving that pure objectivity is an impossible standard. The debate extends into ethics, where moral dilemmas often present situations with equally compelling arguments for opposing actions. In business leadership, decision paralysis is a well-documented challenge. Leaders who hesitate due to an inability to distinguish between options may cause delays in project execution, financial losses, and reduced team morale. Effective leaders recognize the importance of decisive action, even in the absence of complete certainty. They also foster environments where team members feel empowered to make choices without excessive second-guessing. Another real-world application of Buridan's ass is seen in technological advancements and automation. Autonomous systems such as self-driving cars and robotic decision-makers must be programmed to handle situations where multiple choices appear equally valid. Engineers must design fail-safes and priority algorithms to prevent indefinite hesitation in critical scenarios, such as emergency braking systems or surgical AI applications. The paradox also ties into the psychological phenomenon of analysis paralysis, where individuals overanalyze decisions to the point of inaction. This can be particularly damaging in creative industries, where perfectionism and fear of making the wrong choice prevent progress. Writers, artists, and entrepreneurs often struggle with this form of hesitation, delaying projects unnecessarily. Developing a bias toward action can help overcome this barrier and foster productivity. Neuroscientific research suggests that the human brain naturally introduces small biases to avoid decision paralysis. When faced with two identical options, the brain may unconsciously create a preference based on minor sensory differences or past experiences. This built-in mechanism helps prevent real-world manifestations of the Buridan's ass dilemma, ensuring that individuals do not become completely stuck in indecision. In conclusion, Buridan's ass serves as a thought-provoking illustration of the complexities of decision-making. It underscores the risks of indecision, the limitations of pure rationality, and the necessity of external influences in breaking deadlocks. Whether applied to philosophy, economics, politics, artificial intelligence, or personal life, the paradox remains relevant in understanding human behavior and optimizing decision-making processes. By recognizing the importance of timely action and embracing imperfect but necessary choices, individuals and organizations can avoid the pitfalls of inaction and move forward with confidence. Mere addition paradox, also known as Parfit's paradox, is a philosophical problem in population ethics introduced by Derek Parfit. It challenges our intuitions about well-being, morality, and the ethical implications of increasing the number of people in existence. The paradox arises when considering whether adding more people with lives barely worth living makes the world better, worse, or neutral in moral terms. The paradox begins with a simple premise. Consider a population where everyone enjoys a high level of well-being. This population is called A. Now, imagine adding another group of people whose lives are worth living, but not as fulfilled as those in A. If these additional people do not make anyone in A worse off, and their lives are still positive, then the total well-being of the world increases. This new population is called A+. According to utilitarian reasoning, A+ should be at least as good as A, if not better, because more overall happiness exists. Next, consider a further scenario where we equalize well-being across both groups by redistributing resources. The result is a new population, B, where everyone has a lower level of well-being than those in A, but a greater total population. If we continue this process, eventually we reach Z, where a vast population exists, but each individual has a life that is only barely worth living. Paradoxically, standard utilitarian logic suggests that Z is better than A because the sum of well-being is higher, even though no individual is truly flourishing. This conclusion is deeply counterintuitive. Most people would not consider a world filled with barely happy individuals preferable to one with fewer, happier people. The paradox forces us to question how we evaluate the moral worth of populations and whether maximizing total happiness should always be the goal. It also raises concerns about the repugnant conclusion, which states that a very large population with lives barely worth living could be preferable to a smaller population with a high quality of life. The mere additions paradox presents significant challenges for utilitarian ethics, which often prioritizes maximizing total happiness. If adding more people with low well-being increases total happiness, then utilitarianism seems to endorse policies that prioritize population growth over individual quality of life. This raises ethical concerns about real-world issues, such as overpopulation, resource distribution, and environmental sustainability. If total happiness is the only measure of a good society, then the well-being of individuals may become secondary to sheer numerical increases. In response to the paradox, some philosophers propose alternative ethical frameworks. One approach is to introduce a threshold concept of well-being, where only populations that meet a certain quality of life should be counted in moral calculations. Another is to emphasize average well-being instead of total well-being, though this can lead to counterintuitive results, such as considering a smaller but happier population as morally superior to a larger, moderately happy one. Some thinkers advocate for person-affecting views, which argue that only those who already exist matter morally, avoiding issues related to hypothetical future people. The paradox also has implications in economics and public policy. Governments and policymakers must consider how population growth affects economic stability, resource allocation, and social welfare. If increasing the population leads to diminishing returns in quality of life, then policies promoting unchecked growth may not be ideal. However, declining populations also pose economic risks, such as labor shortages and reduced innovation. Striking a balance between population size and quality of life remains a critical challenge. Parfit's paradox also intersects with existential risk and long-term future ethics. Some argue that ensuring the survival of humanity, even in a diminished state, is preferable to extinction. This reasoning suggests that future generations, even if they experience lower well-being, still have value in ethical calculations. Others counter that prioritizing sheer numbers over well-being could lead to morally questionable policies that disregard human dignity and individual flourishing. Psychologically, the paradox highlights how humans perceive happiness and suffering. Studies suggest that people often prioritize avoiding suffering over maximizing happiness, which may explain why the idea of a vast population with minimal well-being feels unsettling. Our moral intuitions may be biased toward protecting existing individuals rather than considering abstract calculations of total happiness. The mere addition paradox also has ethical implications for reproduction and family planning. If each new person adds to total well-being, then is there a moral duty to have more children? Many argue against this view, pointing out that parents should consider not only the number of children, but also the quality of life they can provide. Societal policies on reproduction often reflect these concerns, balancing incentives for population growth with considerations of economic and social stability. Technological advancements further complicate the debate. Advances in medicine and artificial intelligence could eventually enable massive population growth with improved well-being. However, if resources remain limited, societies may face difficult trade-offs between expanding populations and maintaining quality of life. The paradox urges careful consideration of long-term sustainability and ethical responsibility in shaping the future. From a historical perspective, different societies have approached population ethics in varied ways. Some cultures have encouraged large families to strengthen communities and economies, while others have implemented population controls to prevent resource depletion. Understanding Parfit's paradox helps contextualize these policies and their moral implications, providing insight into how humanity balances quantity and quality of life. In literature and media, dystopian narratives often explore the implications of unchecked population growth. Stories about overpopulated, resource-starved futures reflect concerns similar to those in the mere addition paradox. Such narratives serve as cautionary tales, warning against prioritizing sheer numbers over well-being and sustainability. Ultimately, the mere addition paradox forces us to confront difficult ethical dilemmas about the value of life, happiness, and moral responsibility. It challenges traditional utilitarian thinking and invites alternative approaches to population ethics. Whether through rethinking well-being metrics, considering person-affecting principles, or prioritizing sustainability, the paradox encourages deeper reflection on how we define a good society. By critically examining Parfit's paradox, individuals and policymakers can develop more nuanced perspectives on ethical decision-making. Whether applied to global population policies, environmental concerns, or personal choices about family planning, the paradox highlights the complexity of balancing well-being and numerical growth. Understanding these dynamics can lead to more thoughtful and responsible approaches to shaping the future, ensuring that ethical considerations extend beyond mere numbers to the true quality of human life. Ellsberg Paradox is a well-known problem in decision theory and behavioral economics that challenges traditional assumptions of rationality in human decision-making. First introduced by economist Daniel Ellsberg in 1961, the paradox demonstrates how people exhibit ambiguity aversion, preferring known probabilities over unknown ones, even when expected utility theory suggests they should be indifferent. The paradox is best illustrated through a thought experiment involving two urns containing red and black balls. In the first urn, it is known that there are exactly 50 red balls and 50 black balls. In the second urn, the total number of balls remains 100, but the proportion of red to black is unknown. A person is asked to bet on drawing a red or black ball from one of the urns. Expected utility theory suggests that, in the absence of information about the distribution in the second urn, the probability of drawing a red or black ball should be considered equal. However, most people tend to prefer betting on the first urn, where the probabilities are clearly defined, rather than the second urn, where they face uncertainty. This preference for known risks over unknown risks illustrates ambiguity aversion. Traditional economic models assume that rational agents maximize expected utility based on available information. However, the Ellsberg Paradox reveals that people do not always act according to these models. Instead, they demonstrate an irrational preference for avoiding situations where probabilities are ambiguous. The implications of the Ellsberg Paradox extend beyond thought experiments. Ambiguity aversion affects real-world decision-making in finance, insurance, politics, and everyday choices. For instance, investors often prefer stocks with well-established histories over equally promising but uncertain opportunities. Similarly, consumers might avoid new technologies due to uncertainty about their long-term effects, even when potential benefits outweigh known risks. Businesses must navigate this aversion when launching innovative products, ensuring that they provide enough information to mitigate consumer hesitancy. One explanation for this behavior is that ambiguity creates psychological discomfort. When people lack complete information, they may perceive the unknown as inherently riskier than the known, even when rational analysis suggests otherwise. Cognitive biases such as loss aversion and status quo bias reinforce this tendency, leading individuals to stick with familiar options rather than taking chances on uncertain alternatives. This reluctance can have far-reaching consequences, such as hindering technological progress, limiting personal growth, and reinforcing systemic biases within organizations and societies. The paradox also raises questions about the limits of rationality in decision-making. While classical economic models assume that people process probabilities logically, real-world behavior suggests otherwise. Ambiguity aversion contradicts expected utility theory, indicating that alternative decision theories may be necessary to accurately model human behavior. Prospect theory, developed by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, provides one such alternative by incorporating psychological factors into economic decision-making. Their research suggests that people do not always weigh probabilities in a straightforward manner, but instead assign disproportionate weight to outcomes they perceive as particularly risky or uncertain. In business and policy-making, ambiguity aversion has profound implications. Companies introducing new products must consider how consumers perceive uncertainty. Policies aimed at encouraging innovation must address public hesitation toward unfamiliar technologies. Financial markets must account for investors' reluctance to engage with assets that lack a clear risk profile. Governments, in turn, must develop strategies to communicate policy changes effectively, ensuring that ambiguity does not lead to unnecessary resistance or social unrest. Another domain where the paradox is evident is medical decision-making. Patients often struggle to choose between treatments when the long-term effects are unclear. Even when statistical models indicate that an experimental drug has a high likelihood of success, patients and doctors may opt for a more established, yet less effective treatment due to ambiguity aversion. The hesitation to embrace new medical treatments can slow down the adoption of life-saving innovations, despite strong empirical support for their efficacy. The Ellsberg Paradox also plays a role in political decision-making. Voters and policymakers frequently prefer well-defined but suboptimal policies over ambiguous, potentially better alternatives. This phenomenon can lead to policy stagnation, where fear of the unknown prevents necessary reforms from being implemented. Governments and institutions must recognize and mitigate ambiguity aversion to encourage more rational policy choices. In democratic systems, political candidates often exploit ambiguity aversion by presenting their opponents' proposals as risky or uncertain, even when they might offer viable solutions to pressing societal problems. Neuroscientific research has provided insights into the cognitive processes underlying ambiguity aversion. Studies using brain imaging techniques suggest that different neural circuits are activated when individuals face known versus unknown probabilities. The amygdala, associated with fear and risk perception, is more active when people confront ambiguous situations. This finding supports the idea that ambiguity aversion is not just a logical miscalculation, but a deeply ingrained psychological response. Evolutionarily, this makes sense. Avoiding unknown dangers would have been a survival advantage for early humans, even if it sometimes led to overly cautious behavior. Despite its challenges, ambiguity aversion is not inherently irrational. In some cases, avoiding ambiguous situations can be a sound strategy, particularly when unknown risks have severe consequences. However, over-reliance on ambiguity aversion can lead to missed opportunities and inefficient decision-making. Recognizing when this bias is at play allows individuals and organizations to make more informed choices. A measured approach, acknowledging the presence of ambiguity while still making calculated risks, can lead to better long-term outcomes. Efforts to reduce ambiguity. Aversion often focus on improving information availability. Providing clearer risk assessments, increasing transparency, and enhancing decision-making tools can help people feel more comfortable with uncertainty. In financial markets, for example, greater disclosure of company performance data can encourage investment in newer firms. In healthcare, clear communication about treatment risks and benefits can help patients make more informed choices. Additionally, organizational leaders can cultivate cultures that embrace uncertainty as part of innovation, helping employees become more comfortable with taking strategic risks. Educational programs can also help individuals develop better decision-making skills. Teaching probability, statistics, and risk management can reduce the impact of ambiguity aversion by equipping people with the tools to assess uncertainty more objectively. Encouraging critical thinking and promoting awareness of cognitive biases can further improve decision-making processes. By incorporating decision theory into school curricula and professional training programs, societies can foster a more rational approach to handling uncertainty. The Ellsberg Paradox remains a cornerstone of behavioral economics and decision theory, challenging the notion that human beings are purely rational actors. It highlights the psychological complexities involved in assessing risk and uncertainty, demonstrating that decision-making is influenced by more than just logical calculations. By understanding and addressing ambiguity aversion, individuals, businesses, and policymakers can navigate uncertainty more effectively, making choices that align with long-term goals rather than immediate psychological comfort. Ultimately, the paradox serves as a reminder that while uncertainty can be unsettling, it is an inevitable part of life. Learning to manage ambiguity effectively, rather than avoiding it outright, can lead to more informed, forward-thinking decision-making. Whether in finance, healthcare, politics, or personal life, recognizing and mitigating the effects of ambiguity aversion can open new opportunities and foster a more adaptive, resilient mindset. The challenge lies not in eliminating uncertainty, but in developing strategies to navigate it wisely, ensuring that fear of the unknown does not stand in the way of progress and innovation. Newcomb's paradox is a thought experiment that delves deep into the world of decision theory, free will, and prediction. Proposed by the physicist William Newcomb in 1960, the paradox involves two boxes and a decision that seems straightforward, yet leads to surprising and conflicting results when analyzed under different logical frameworks. The paradox has intrigued philosophers, mathematicians, and decision theorists for decades, posing challenging questions about rationality, the nature of choice, and how we make decisions under uncertainty. In Newcomb's paradox, you are presented with two boxes, Box A and Box B. Box A is transparent and contains a visible amount of $1,000. Box B is opaque, and it contains either $1 million or nothing at all. You are given the following choice. Take only Box B. take both box A and box B. However, there's an additional twist. Before you make your decision, a highly reliable and seemingly omniscient predictor, often described as a superintelligent being, has already predicted your choice. If the predictor believes you will choose only box B, then box B contains $1 million. If the predictor believes you will choose both boxes, then box B contains nothing, and box A still contains $1,000. At first glance, the decision seems simple. The rational thing to do would be to take both boxes. After all, box A is guaranteed to contain $1,000, and there's no reason not to take it, regardless of the contents of box B. This choice seems logical from the standpoint of maximizing immediate monetary gain, and it aligns with classical decision theory. This is the strategy of dominance, where you act in a way that provides a better outcome regardless of the predictor's decision. However, the paradox arises when you consider the predictor's role. The predictor is highly accurate, and in most cases, can predict your decision with near certainty. If the predictor believes you will take only box B, then it has placed $1 million in box B. But if the predictor believes you will take both boxes, then it has left box B empty, and you only get the $1,000 from box A. The dilemma becomes clear. If you trust the predictor's ability, choosing only box B seems like the better option, as it could result in $1 million. On the other hand, if you trust only the logic of maximizing your immediate gain, you should take both boxes. This decision-making conflict has profound implications for how we think about rationality, free will, and the role of prediction in decision theory. It raises the question, should we base our decisions purely on what is logically advantageous, or should we consider the potential influence of a predictive force, even if we don't fully understand how it works? One perspective on the paradox comes from the viewpoint of one-boxers, who argue that the best decision is to take only box B. They believe that by trusting the predictor's ability to make an accurate prediction, they will end up with $1 million in box B. The logic behind this decision is that the predictor has already placed $1 million in box B if it predicts you will choose only that box, and no amount of reasoning about the contents of box A should change your decision. For a one-boxer, the optimal choice is based on the assumption that the predictor is highly reliable and has already made an accurate forecast about your behavior. Thus, taking both boxes would not increase the total amount of money they will receive. On the other hand, the two-boxers argue that the rational decision is to take both boxes. From a traditional decision theory perspective, this makes sense. Box A always contains $1,000, and there's no reason not to take it, regardless of what is in box B. The fact that the predictor has already made a prediction is irrelevant, since the predictor's action has already been determined and cannot change based on your current choice. The two boxers believe that their decision should be based solely on maximizing their immediate payoff rather than relying on the prediction of an external force. If the predictor is wrong, they still get $1,000 from box A, which makes taking both boxes the rational move. The paradox also brings into question the concept of free will. If the predictor is so accurate that it can predict your choice with near certainty, does this undermine your ability to make free decisions? In one sense, if the predictor can predict your behavior, it may suggest that your actions are determined or influenced by external forces, leading to philosophical questions about determinism and the nature of free will. If we are free to choose our actions, then the accuracy of the predictor seems to challenge this freedom by making the choice predictable. However, if we accept that the predictor can only make probabilistic predictions based on our past behavior and certain tendencies, it may suggest that while our decisions are not fully determined, they can still be predicted with a high degree of accuracy. Another layer of complexity is added when we consider the implications of Newcomb's paradox on rationality. Classical decision theory advocates for maximizing expected utility, choosing the option that provides the highest expected outcome based on available information. For the two boxers, the expected utility of taking both boxes is clear: $1,000 from box A and possibly nothing from box B. For the one boxers, the expected utility of taking only box B is $1 million, based on the assumption that the predictor has placed it there. The paradox forces us to reconsider whether expected utility maximization is always the best strategy, or whether there are cases where predicting the behavior of others, in this case, the predictor, should factor into our decision-making process. Despite the logical tensions and debates surrounding Newcomb's paradox, the thought experiment continues to be a vital part of discussions in philosophy, economics, and artificial intelligence. The paradox serves as a bridge between different perspectives on rationality, prediction, and free will, and it helps to highlight the difficulties inherent in making decisions under uncertainty. Whether or not we should trust a predictive force, and whether such trust should influence our choices, remains an open question. Ultimately, Newcomb's paradox forces us to confront the limits of our understanding of rational behavior and the complex dynamics between prediction, choice, and the world around us. Moore's paradox is a famous philosophical puzzle that centers on the apparent contradiction between certain types of statements. It was first introduced by the British philosopher G.E. Moore in 1939 and has since been the subject of extensive analysis in epistemology and philosophy of language. The paradox involves statements that seem logically inconsistent, even though they are made in a seemingly ordinary and straightforward manner. Despite the statements appearing self-contradictory, they are not logically impossible, making Moore's paradox a profound and challenging issue for philosophers. The paradox is typically illustrated with the following example. A person might say, "It is raining, but I do not believe that it is raining." On the surface, this seems like a perfectly coherent statement, yet there appears to be something deeply wrong with it. The issue arises because, in ordinary circumstances, if a person sincerely asserts that it is raining, they are expected to also believe that it is raining. The contradiction lies in the fact that the person is claiming to believe one thing, "It is raining," while also claiming to believe the opposite, "I do not believe that it is raining." This creates a paradoxical situation in which the two parts of the statement are logically inconsistent, yet the statement itself does not seem impossible or nonsensical. The core of Moore's paradox lies in the relationship between belief and assertion. Typically, when someone makes an assertion about the world, it is assumed that they believe the content of that assertion. For example, if a person says, "The sky is blue," it is generally understood that they believed the sky is blue. Similarly, if someone asserts that something is the case, it is usually expected that they hold that belief. Moore's paradox calls into question this connection between belief and assertion, revealing that there are situations where a person can assert something while denying their belief in that very assertion. To understand why Moore's paradox is puzzling, it is useful to consider some background in epistemology and philosophy of language. When we assert something, we typically expect our beliefs and assertions to be in alignment. This alignment is often seen as a necessary feature of rational thought. However, Moore's paradox suggests that it is possible for a person to assert something while simultaneously denying belief in it, creating a tension between the act of assertion and the act of believing. Philosophers have approached Moore's paradox from various angles, seeking to understand why such statements seem so problematic and what they tell us about belief, assertion, and rationality. One possible explanation is that the paradox arises from a clash between different levels of discourse. When a person says, "It is raining, but I do not believe that it is raining," They are making two distinct types of statements. One about the external world, the assertion that it is raining, and one about their own mental state, the denial of their belief in that proposition. The paradox may stem from the tension between these two types of statements, as they seem to be inconsistent with one another at a deeper level. Another approach to Moore's paradox involves examining the concept of implicit belief. Some philosophers argue that when a person asserts something, they are not merely stating a fact, but also implicitly expressing their belief in that fact. In this view, the paradox arises because the person's assertion, e.g., "it is raining," implicitly carries the belief that it is true, even if they explicitly deny that belief, e.g., "I do not believe that it is raining." The paradox thus highlights the complexity of belief and assertion, showing that even when a person denies their belief, their assertion may still carry an implicit belief that contradicts their explicit denial. Other philosophers have suggested that Moore's paradox may be a result of self-deception or cognitive dissonance. In this interpretation, the person making the paradoxical statement may be trying to convince themselves of something that they do not believe. For example, someone might say, "It is raining, but I do not believe that it is raining," because they are experiencing a conflict between their sensory experience, which suggests that it is raining, and their cognitive or emotional state, which leads them to deny that it is raining. In this case, the paradox arises from an internal conflict between different mental states rather than a contradiction between the assertion and the belief. Despite the many possible interpretations, Moore's paradox remains a central topic in discussions of belief, assertion, and rationality. It challenges our understanding of how beliefs and assertions relate to one another, and forces us to reconsider the nature of contradiction and consistency in ordinary language. One of the most intriguing aspects of Moore's paradox is that, while the statements involved seem contradictory, they do not appear to be logically impossible. This gives the paradox a unique place in philosophical discussions, as it raises questions about the limits of logical consistency and the role of context in determining the meaning of statements. Moore's paradox also has important implications for theories of meaning and the philosophy of language. The paradox challenges the idea that the meaning of a statement is always determined by the beliefs or intentions of the speaker. In the case of Moore's paradox, the meaning of the statement seems to be in tension with the speaker's beliefs, suggesting that meaning is not always directly tied to belief. This has led some philosophers to propose that the meaning of a statement may be determined by a broader set of contextual factors, including the speaker's intentions, the social context of the conversation, and the logical structure of the language being used. In addition, Moore's paradox raises questions about the nature of self-knowledge and introspection. The paradox involves a situation in which a person makes a statement about their own beliefs that seems to contradict their actual beliefs. This suggests that our understanding of our own mental states may not always be as clear and transparent as we might assume. In this sense, Moore's paradox may highlight the complexities of self-knowledge and the potential for error or confusion in our understanding of our own beliefs. Despite the apparent contradictions involved, Moore's paradox does not seem to be logically impossible. This makes it distinct from other logical paradoxes, such as the liar paradox, where a statement seems to be both true and false at the same time. Instead, Moore's paradox reveals a tension between different aspects of our mental life, between belief and assertion, between self-knowledge and external observation, and between explicit and implicit mental states. It challenges our understanding of how we express our beliefs and how those beliefs are related to the world around us. In conclusion, Moore's paradox presents a fascinating challenge to our understanding of belief, assertion, and rationality. It highlights the complexities of how we make statements about the world and our own mental states, and it forces us to reconsider the relationship between belief and assertion. Despite the apparent contradiction in the paradoxical statements, Moore's paradox does not reveal a logical impossibility, but rather a deeper tension in our understanding of meaning, belief, and self-knowledge. As such, it continues to be a central issue in contemporary philosophy, prompting new insights into the nature of rationality and the workings of the human mind. The preference reversal paradox is a phenomenon observed in decision theory and behavioral economics, where individuals change their preferences between two options depending on how those options are presented, even when the choices are logically equivalent. This paradox challenges the assumption of rationality in traditional economic models, which suggests that people's preferences should remain consistent across different contexts. It was first identified in the 1980s by psychologists and economists studying choice behavior, and it has since become a significant area of research in the field of behavioral economics. The basic idea behind the preference reversal paradox is that people can make different choices depending on how options are framed, even when the underlying preferences should theoretically lead to the same decision. This can occur when individuals are asked to make choices in different ways, such as when choosing between two gambles or investments. For example, consider the following two options: a gamble where there is a 50% chance of winning $100 and a 50% chance of winning $200. A gamble where there is a 100% chance of winning $150. In a typical scenario, a person might be asked to rank these options or assign them a value based on their preferences. According to traditional economic theory, the person should evaluate the expected value of each option and choose the one with the higher expected value. The expected value of the first gamble is $150, 0.5 multiplied by 100 plus 0.5 multiplied by 200. And the expected value of the second gamble is also $150, 1 multiplied by 150. Since the expected values are equal, traditional models suggest that the individual should be indifferent between the two options. However, when presented with these options in different formats, individuals often reverse their preferences. For example, if they are first asked to assign a monetary value to each option, they may value the certain $150 option more highly than the gamble, even though the expected value is the same. But when asked to choose between the two options, they might prefer the gamble over the certain $150. This creates a preference reversal, where the individual's ranking or valuation of the options differs depending on the context or method of evaluation. The preference reversal paradox raises important questions about the consistency of human preferences and decision-making. Traditional economic models rely on the assumption that individuals make decisions based on stable, well-defined preferences, and that these preferences remain consistent across different situations. According to these models, preferences should be transitive. If a person prefers option A to option B and option B to option C, they should also prefer option A to option C. However, the preference reversal paradox suggests that this assumption of transitivity may not hold in real-world decision-making. Several explanations have been proposed to account for the preference reversal paradox. One possibility is that people do not always make decisions based on the objective value or utility of the options. Instead, they may be influenced by psychological factors, such as the perceived risk or uncertainty of the options, or by how the options are framed. For instance, individuals may be more sensitive to the certainty of a given outcome than to the potential variability in a gamble, even if the expected value is the same. This can lead to preference reversals when the same options are presented in different ways. Another explanation involves the concept of loss aversion, which is a key idea in prospect theory, a behavioral economic theory developed by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. Loss aversion suggests that people experience losses more intensely than gains of the same magnitude. As a result, individuals may prefer a certain outcome over a risky one, even if the expected value is the same, because they are more sensitive to the potential for loss than to the potential for gain. When a gamble involves the possibility of losing, individuals may become more risk-averse, leading them to prefer a certain outcome instead. In addition, some researchers have suggested that the preference reversal paradox may arise from a failure to properly integrate the different factors that influence decision-making. For example, when people are asked to assign values to the options, they may focus on one aspect of the options, such as the certainty of the $150 option, and ignore other factors, such as the potential for higher gains in the gamble. However, when asked to choose between the two options, individuals may consider a broader range of factors, including the potential for higher payoffs, leading them to choose the gamble even though they previously valued the certain outcome more highly. The preference reversal paradox also highlights the limitations of traditional economic models in capturing real-world decision-making. While traditional models assume that individuals make decisions based on stable preferences and objective evaluations of outcomes, the paradox shows that preferences can be influenced by factors such as framing effects, emotional responses, and cognitive biases. This has led to the development of alternative models, such as prospect theory, which take into account the psychological and emotional factors that influence decision-making. Despite the complexity of the preference reversal paradox, it has important implications for fields such as economics, psychology, and public policy. It challenges the assumption that individuals always make rational, consistent decisions based on their preferences, and it suggests that decision-making is influenced by a variety of psychological and contextual factors. Understanding the mechanisms behind preference reversals can help policymakers design better interventions and improve decision-making in areas such as finance, health, and public policy. For example, in the context of consumer choice, preference reversals could explain why people often make decisions that seem irrational or inconsistent, such as choosing products based on how they are framed or presented, rather than on their true value. In the context of public policy, understanding preference reversals could help policymakers design interventions that take into account the psychological biases that influence decision-making. By recognizing the factors that lead to preference reversals, policymakers can help individuals make more informed, consistent decisions. The preference reversal paradox also has implications for the study of human behavior and the nature of rationality. It suggests that human decision-making is not always guided by objective calculations of utility, but is instead influenced by a variety of psychological and emotional factors. This challenges traditional notions of rationality and suggests that a more nuanced understanding of human behavior is needed to fully explain how individuals make decisions. In conclusion, the preference reversal paradox reveals important insights into the complexities of human decision-making. It challenges the traditional assumption of stable, consistent preferences and highlights the role of psychological and contextual factors in shaping decisions. While traditional economic models rely on the idea of rational decision-making based on stable preferences, the paradox suggests that real-world decision-making is more complex and influenced by a variety of factors. By understanding the mechanisms behind preference reversals, researchers and policymakers can better understand human behavior and design interventions that improve decision-making in a wide range of contexts. The St. Petersburg Paradox is a famous problem in probability theory and decision theory that was introduced by the Swiss mathematician Daniel Bernoulli in 1738. The paradox presents a situation in which a seemingly simple gambling game leads to an extremely counterintuitive result about the value of money and human decision-making. Despite its apparent simplicity, the Petersburg Paradox has become a key example in the study of expected value, utility theory, and the limitations of classical economic models. The game at the heart of the St. Petersburg Paradox is as follows. A player pays a fixed amount to enter the game, and then a fair coin is flipped repeatedly until it lands on heads. The game is structured so that the player wins an increasing amount of money based on the number of flips it takes to land heads. Specifically, the prize is calculated as follows. The player wins $2 if heads comes up on the first flip, $4 if heads comes up on the second flip, $8 if heads comes up on the third flip, and so on. The prize doubles each time heads does not appear, and the player receives the prize amount corresponding to the flip at which heads occurs. If heads never appears, the game continues indefinitely, but this is considered a theoretical extreme in the setup of the paradox. To calculate the expected value of this game, we sum the probability-weighted outcomes of the game. The probability of heads appearing on the first flip is 1/2, on the second flip is 1/4, on the third flip is 1/8, and so on. Thus, the expected value of the game can be calculated by multiplying each possible prize by the probability of that prize occurring, and summing these values. The probability of winning $2 is 1/2, so the expected value of this outcome is 1/2 multiplied by $2 equals $1. The probability of winning $4 is 1/4, so the expected value of this outcome is 1/4 multiplied by $4 equals $1. The probability of winning $8 is 1/8, so the expected value of this outcome is 1/8 multiplied by $8 equals $1, and so on. When this calculation is extended to infinity, the total expected value of the game is the sum of an infinite series where each term is $1. This results in an expected value of infinity. The paradox arises from the fact that, according to classical economic theory, individuals should be willing to pay any finite amount to enter the game because the expected value of the game is infinite. However, in practice, people are generally not willing to pay an enormous amount to play the game, even though its expected value is theoretically infinite. In fact, people usually offer only a small amount to play, far less than what would be expected based on the infinite expected value. This discrepancy between the expected value and the amount that people are willing to pay is what makes the St. Petersburg Paradox so puzzling. The St. Petersburg Paradox challenges the assumption of rational decision-making in classical economics, where individuals are assumed to make choices based on the expected value of a given outcome. The paradox suggests that individuals do not always make decisions based on expected value alone, and that there may be other psychological or contextual factors that influence their choices. This has led to the development of alternative theories, such as utility theory, which attempt to account for human behavior in situations like the St. Petersburg Paradox. One explanation for the discrepancy between expected value and willingness to pay involves the concept of diminishing marginal utility. According to classical utility theory, the value of money decreases as individuals accumulate more wealth. This is known as diminishing marginal utility. Each additional dollar has less value to a person than the previous dollar. In the case of the St. Petersburg Paradox, the amount of money involved in the game grows exponentially, but each additional dollar of expected value has less impact on an individual's overall utility. As a result, even though the expected value of the game is infinite, the marginal utility of the potential winnings is finite, and people are not willing to pay an enormous amount to play. Another explanation involves the role of risk aversion. In real-world decision-making, individuals often exhibit risk-averse behavior, meaning that they prefer certain outcomes over uncertain ones, even when the expected value of the uncertain outcome is higher. This behavior is especially evident in situations involving large amounts of money or high levels of uncertainty, such as the St. Petersburg Paradox. The large, albeit unlikely, payouts in the game may be seen as too risky for most individuals, leading them to value the game less than its expected value would suggest. Risk aversion helps explain why people may not be willing to pay as much as the infinite expected value to participate in the game. The St. Petersburg Paradox also raises important questions about the concept of expected value and its limitations in predicting human behavior. Expected value is a mathematical concept that assumes individuals make decisions solely based on the probability-weighted average of outcomes. However, in the St. Petersburg Paradox, expected value leads to a counterintuitive result, suggesting that expected value alone is not always a sufficient guide to decision-making. This has led to the development of alternative models, such as prospect theory, which account for the psychological factors that influence decisions under uncertainty, including the tendency to overweigh small probabilities and the aversion to large, uncertain risks. One of the key insights from the St. Petersburg Paradox is that decision-making is not solely determined by expected value, but is influenced by how individuals perceive risk and utility. This realization has had far-reaching implications in economics, finance, and behavioral science, leading to a deeper understanding of how people make decisions in the face of uncertainty. The paradox has also prompted the development of new models of utility and decision-making, such as those based on diminishing marginal utility and risk aversion, which provide a more accurate description of real-world behavior. In conclusion, the St. Petersburg Paradox is a striking example of how theoretical models can produce results that diverge significantly from real-world behavior. The paradox challenges the assumption that individuals always make decisions based on expected value and highlights the importance of psychological and contextual factors in shaping decision-making. While traditional economic models rely on the idea of rational decision-making based on stable preferences, the paradox suggests that real-world decision-making is more complex and influenced by a variety of factors. By understanding the mechanisms behind the St. Petersburg Paradox, researchers have gained valuable insights into human behavior under uncertainty, and have developed alternative models that offer a more nuanced understanding of how individuals make choices in the face of risk. Despite its simplicity, the St. Petersburg Paradox continues to be an important and thought-provoking topic in the fields of economics, psychology, and decision theory. The Allais Paradox is a notable and widely discussed problem in decision theory that was introduced by the French economist Maurice Allais in 1953. This paradox poses a direct challenge to the expected utility theory, which suggests that individuals make decisions by selecting options that maximize their expected utility. Expected utility theory has been a cornerstone of classical economics and decision theory, operating under the assumption that individuals are rational decision-makers who weigh outcomes based on their probabilities and associated utilities. The Allais Paradox, however, demonstrates that real-world human decision-making often deviates from these rational expectations, exposing a gap between theory and actual behavior. The Allais Paradox involves two distinct sets of choices, each containing two options. The choices are framed to expose human tendencies to overvalue certainty and to highlight inconsistencies in risk preferences. The first set of choices presents Option 1, a guaranteed win of $1 million. Option 2, a gamble where there is a 10% chance of winning $5 million, an 89% chance of winning $1 million, and a 1% chance of winning nothing. The second set of choices presents Option 3, a gamble where there is an 11% chance of winning $5 million and an 89% chance of winning nothing. Option 4, a gamble where there is a 10% chance of winning $5 million and a 90% chance of winning nothing. The objective of the Allais Paradox is to examine how individuals make decisions when faced with different options that involve varying levels of risk and certainty. According to expected utility theory, individuals should behave consistently when choosing between these options. That is, if they prefer the guaranteed $1 million in the first set, option 1, they should also prefer the gamble with a higher probability of winning $5 million in the second set, option 3, over the other gamble, option 4, because the probabilities of the outcomes are similar in both cases. However, what Allais observed in experiments with real participants was that many individuals consistently chose option 1 in the first set, the guaranteed $1 million, but then, when faced with the second set, they chose option 3, despite the fact that option 4 in the second set had a very similar expected value but was perceived as a worse option. This behavior violates the independence axiom of expected utility theory, as it demonstrates that people are making choices based on factors other than the simple expected utility of outcomes. The inconsistency observed in the Allais Paradox can be explained in part by human psychology and the way individuals perceive risk and certainty. One of the most significant psychological factors at play is risk aversion. People tend to prefer certainty over uncertainty, even when the expected value of a gamble is higher than a guaranteed outcome. This phenomenon is known as the certainty effect, and it explains why people often prefer the guaranteed $1 million in the first set over the gamble with a higher expected value. In the first set, option 1 offers a certain outcome of $1 million, whereas option 2 involves a gamble with a small chance of winning $5 million. The guaranteed amount is attractive to individuals who are risk-averse because it eliminates uncertainty, and they are willing to accept a smaller but certain reward rather than taking a chance on a higher payoff with a slim probability of winning. This is a key example of risk aversion, a tendency where individuals prefer smaller, more predictable outcomes over larger, uncertain ones, even if the expected value of the gamble is higher. In the second set, the difference between options 3 and 4 is quite small in terms of expected value. Both gambles involve a 10% chance of winning $5 million, but the probabilities differ only slightly. Option 3 offers an 11% chance of winning, while option 4 offers a 10% chance. Nevertheless, many individuals tend to prefer option 3, which offers a slightly higher probability of winning, despite the fact that option 4 has a very similar expected value. This preference is driven by a psychological phenomenon known as probability weighting, where individuals tend to overweigh small probabilities, leading them to perceive a slight increase in probability as a significantly better option, even when the expected value is almost the same. The Allais Paradox can be understood through two primary psychological concepts: probability weighting and certainty effects. Probability weighting. This concept refers to the tendency of individuals to give disproportionate weight to small probabilities, even when the expected value of a gamble is similar to other options. In the context of the Allais Paradox, the slight difference in probability between options 3 and 4 in the second set, an 11% chance versus a 10% chance, makes option 3 seem more appealing to individuals, even though the difference in expected value is negligible. People tend to overestimate the likelihood of winning when there's a small probability involved, and this bias leads them to favor option 3. Certainty effects. The certainty effect describes the tendency of people to overweight certain outcomes. When faced with a guaranteed outcome, such as in option 1 of the first set, individuals place a higher subjective value on the certainty of that outcome, even though the expected utility of a gamble might be higher. This leads them to choose the guaranteed $1 million over a gamble with higher expected value, as they perceived the certainty of the outcome as being more valuable than the uncertainty of the gamble. The Allais Paradox is significant because it directly challenges the assumption of rational decision-making that underlies classical economic theories, particularly expected utility theory. Expected utility theory assumes that individuals make decisions based solely on the mathematical expected values of the outcomes, with no regard for the psychological factors that influence decision-making. However, the Allais Paradox reveals that people do not always act in ways that maximize their expected utility, instead making decisions based on how risks and outcomes are framed, the certainty of outcomes and other psychological biases. The paradox also draws attention to the limitations of expected utility theory, suggesting that models of decision-making need to account for psychological factors like loss aversion, framing effects, and probability weighting. These insights led to the development of prospect theory, formulated by psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky in 1979, which provides a more accurate description of how people make decisions under risk and uncertainty. Prospect theory incorporates the idea that individuals value gains and losses differently, placing greater emphasis on potential losses than equivalent gains. It also accounts for the fact that people tend to overweigh small probabilities and are generally risk-averse when faced with certain outcomes. In conclusion, the Allais Paradox remains a cornerstone in the study of decision theory and behavioral economics. It not only highlights the limitations of expected utility theory, but also provides critical insights into human behavior in situations involving risk and uncertainty. The paradox challenges the notion that individuals always act as rational maximizers of expected utility, demonstrating that human decision-making is influenced by factors like probability weighting, certainty effects, and risk aversion. By revealing these inconsistencies in human decision-making, the Allais Paradox has led to the development of alternative models, such as prospect theory, which better capture the complexities of how people make choices in real-world scenarios. The Allais Paradox serves as a reminder that human preferences and decision-making processes are far more complicated than traditional economic models often suggest. It has paved the way for a more nuanced understanding of how people assess risks, weigh probabilities, and value outcomes, leading to more accurate predictions and models of behavior in economics, finance, and other fields. The Jevons Paradox is a concept introduced by the British economist William Stanley Jevons in 1865, which challenges the assumption that improvements in the efficiency of resource usage lead to a proportional reduction in resource consumption. The paradox states that as technological advancements make the use of a resource more efficient, the demand for that resource may actually increase rather than decrease, contrary to what might be expected based on the assumption that increased efficiency would lead to a reduction in consumption. Jevons' observation was groundbreaking at the time, as it questioned the fundamental principles of classical economics, which assumed that improved efficiency always leads to less resource consumption. Jevons first observed this paradox in the context of coal consumption in England during the Industrial Revolution. At the time, improvements in the efficiency of steam engines were making coal use more effective, meaning that less coal was required to produce the same amount of energy. However, Jevons noticed that as steam engines became more efficient, they were being used more widely in various industries, such as manufacturing, transportation, and other sectors, which led to an overall increase in the total demand for coal. This result contradicted the initial expectation that increased efficiency would lead to a decrease in coal consumption. Instead, the paradox highlighted that the greater efficiency of resource use could result in a greater overall consumption of that resource, as it opens up new areas of use and increases overall economic activity. The core of the Jevons Paradox lies in the relationship between efficiency and demand. Typically, when a technology becomes more efficient, the cost of using a resource decreases, which makes it more affordable and attractive to consumers and industries. As a result, the demand for the resource may increase as it becomes cheaper to produce goods or services, or as more industries and sectors find it feasible to adopt the technology. In this way, increased efficiency can lead to a rise in the total consumption of a resource, rather than a decrease. The paradox is often illustrated with the example of the steam engine and coal consumption. In the early days of the Industrial Revolution, the steam engine was an important technological advancement that allowed factories, trains, and ships to run more efficiently. The development of more efficient steam engines meant that less coal was needed to generate the same amount of power, leading to the expectation that coal consumption would decrease. However, as steam engines became more efficient, their widespread adoption across various sectors, including transportation, manufacturing, and even domestic use, actually led to a net increase in coal consumption. This unexpected outcome was the essence of Jevons Paradox. As the efficiency of coal use increased, so did the total demand for coal. The Jevons Paradox has broader implications beyond just coal or energy. It applies to many other resources and sectors where technological efficiency has led to unintended increases in consumption. For example, in the context of transportation, improvements in fuel efficiency have made cars, trucks, and airplanes more energy efficient. However, as fuel efficiency improves, the cost of traveling decreases, which may encourage people to drive more, travel farther, or purchase more vehicles, all of which can lead to an increase in total fuel consumption. Similarly, the rise of more efficient electronics, such as smartphones, computers, and appliances, may lower the cost of producing these devices, making them more accessible to consumers. However, as these devices become more affordable and widespread, their overall energy consumption might increase, despite the improvements in energy efficiency of the devices themselves. In this sense, Jevons Paradox is a cautionary reminder that efficiency gains do not necessarily result in lower resource consumption, and that growth in demand can offset the benefits of efficiency improvements. The Jevons Paradox can be explained through the concept of the hum-rebound effect, which refers to the phenomenon where improvements in efficiency lead to changes in behavior that offset the expected reductions in resource use. The rebound effect occurs because increased efficiency lowers the cost of using a resource, making it more attractive to consumers and businesses. As the cost of a resource decreases, its relative attractiveness increases, which can lead to increased demand for it. This effect can be either partial or full, depending on the specific circumstances. A partial rebound means that the increase in demand is less than the savings from the efficiency improvement, while a full rebound means that the increased demand completely cancels out the savings from efficiency gains. In some cases, the rebound effect can even lead to greater consumption than before the efficiency improvement was made. The Jevons Paradox is not just about energy efficiency. It can also be applied to other aspects of human behavior and consumption patterns. The paradox has been observed in industries such as transportation, manufacturing, and agriculture, where increases in productivity or efficiency have often led to greater overall demand for goods and services, thereby contributing to environmental degradation. One notable example of this phenomenon is in the field of agriculture, where advances in farming technology have led to higher crop yields, lower costs of production, and greater food availability. However, these technological advancements have also contributed to increased agricultural production, leading to greater land use, increased water consumption, and higher greenhouse gas emissions, which offset the benefits of improved efficiency. One of the most significant implications of the Jevons Paradox is its impact on sustainability and environmental policy. If efficiency improvements alone lead to increased resource consumption, then relying solely on technology to reduce environmental impact may not be a sufficient strategy. While improving efficiency can reduce the cost of production and provide economic benefits, it can also lead to an increase in the overall demand for the resource, which could offset or even outweigh the initial efficiency gains. This paradox suggests that efforts to reduce the consumption of a resource through efficiency improvements alone may not be sufficient to achieve desired reductions in resource use or environmental impact. The Jevons Paradox suggests that addressing environmental problems requires more than just technological innovation. Policymakers must consider a broader range of strategies, such as promoting behavior changes, implementing resource consumption limits, and encouraging the development of alternative resources. These strategies may include carbon taxes, energy caps, or regulations that encourage sustainable practices. Without these complementary policies, technological progress may simply lead to greater overall consumption and environmental degradation. Moreover, Jevons Paradox has significant implications for the way we approach global challenges such as climate change and resource depletion. While the development of cleaner, more efficient technologies is important, it must be accompanied by strategies that also focus on reducing the overall demand for energy and resources. If technological advancements are not coupled with policies that limit growth in resource consumption, the Jevons Paradox suggests that efforts to reduce environmental impact will be less effective. In conclusion, the Jevons Paradox demonstrates the counterintuitive relationship between technological efficiency and resource consumption. While improvements in efficiency can provide economic and environmental benefits, they may also lead to an increase in overall resource demand, as they lower the cost of using the resource and make it more widely accessible. This paradox challenges the assumption that technological progress will inevitably lead to reductions in resource consumption and environmental impact. The Jevons Paradox underscores the need for more comprehensive solutions that go beyond simply improving efficiency, to include broader strategies that focus on reducing consumption, changing behavior, and promoting sustainability. It remains a critical concept in the study of economics, environmental science, and sustainability, illustrating the complexity of addressing global challenges such as climate change, resource depletion, and environmental degradation. Braess's paradox is a concept in network theory and transportation science that demonstrates an apparently counterintuitive situation in which adding extra capacity to a network can actually lead to worse performance and increased congestion. This paradox was discovered by the German mathematician Dietrich Braess in 1968. Initially, it seems logical that adding more roads or routes to a transportation system would ease congestion and improve the flow of traffic. However, Braess's paradox shows that this is not always the case, as it can sometimes lead to a less efficient overall outcome for the system. Braess's paradox typically arises in the context of road networks, where the capacity of roads is thought to influence how traffic flows. It is especially relevant in situations where drivers make decisions based on their own self-interest, without coordination or the central planning. In such systems, the introduction of new routes can alter the equilibrium of traffic patterns, leading to an increase in overall travel time for everyone, including those who would have used the new route. The paradox is usually explained with a simple example involving a network of roads and commuters. Consider a scenario in which there are two main roads, Road A and Road B, connecting 2 points, with the traffic flowing from a starting point, point S, to a destination point, point D. In this simple model, both roads have a certain level of capacity and congestion, and the total travel time for each driver depends on how many cars are using each road. Each driver chooses their route based on the shortest perceived travel time. Now, imagine that a third road, Road C, is added to the network, providing an additional route that connects the same 2 points. Intuitively, one might expect that the addition of Road C would reduce congestion on the original roads and therefore lower the travel time for all drivers. However, Braess's paradox demonstrates that this addition can lead to a situation where the overall traffic flow worsens. This happens because the presence of Road C changes the traffic dynamics and may lead some drivers to shift their routes in a way that causes traffic to become more congested across the entire network. As a result, the overall travel time for everyone may increase, even though the addition of a new road would seemingly make the system more efficient. The essence of Braess's paradox lies in the way individual drivers make decisions based on their own best interests, but without considering the collective consequences of those decisions. In a typical road network, each driver selects their route to minimize their own travel time, assuming that they are the only one making the choice. This leads to what is known as a Nash equilibrium, a state in which no driver can improve their travel time by switching routes. However, when a new road is added to the network, the Nash equilibrium shifts, and drivers may end up choosing routes in ways that lead to greater congestion for everyone. In some cases, the overall system of roads becomes less efficient due to the actions of individual drivers, each acting in their own self-interest. The paradox can be illustrated through a numerical example. Suppose that there are 2 routes, each with different travel times depending on the number of cars using them. If the number of cars is low, the travel time on both roads is quick, but as more cars join, congestion increases and travel times rise. Initially, without the new road, the traffic flow may be balanced in such a way that each road has an optimal amount of traffic. However, when a third road is added, drivers may perceive it as a faster route and switch to it. This change in behavior can overload the new road, causing traffic to back up on it, which in turn increases congestion on the other roads. In the end, everyone's travel time may increase, and the system as a whole becomes less efficient. The key takeaway from Braess's paradox is that in some cases, adding new infrastructure or resources to a system can lead to unintended consequences, especially when individuals are allowed to make independent decisions based on their own self-interest. This result is particularly important in the context of transportation planning, where adding new roads or lanes is often seen as a solution to traffic congestion. Braess's paradox suggests that such strategies may not always have the desired outcome, and may even exacerbate the problem. The paradox can be applied to various real-world situations beyond road networks. For example, in the context of computer networks, Braess's paradox can occur when additional bandwidth or new routes are introduced to a network, leading to unexpected congestion due to the altered behavior of users. Similarly, in the case of supply chains or logistical networks, the introduction of new routes or nodes may not always improve overall efficiency if individuals or firms adjust their strategies in ways that lead to bottlenecks or inefficiencies. The phenomenon underlying Braess's paradox is often referred to as selfish routing or non-cooperative behavior. In these systems, each participant makes decisions to maximize their own benefit without considering the impact of their actions on others. This behavior can lead to suboptimal outcomes for the system as a whole, as individual decisions based on personal interests do not always align with the overall welfare of the system. The paradox also has important implications for policymaking and infrastructure development. In cases where congestion is a problem, simply adding more capacity to a network may not be the most effective solution. Instead, policymakers may need to consider alternative strategies, such as encouraging coordination among users, implementing pricing mechanisms, such as congestion pricing, or promoting public transportation to reduce the overall number of individual vehicles on the road. These approaches aim to account for the collective behavior of users and reduce the likelihood of unintended consequences. In addition to transportation networks, Braess's paradox has applications in various fields of economics and game theory. In these contexts, the paradox highlights the limitations of relying solely on individual incentives to drive optimal outcomes. It suggests that, in some cases, collective action or coordination is necessary to achieve a more efficient outcome for the system as a whole. The paradox also emphasizes the importance of considering the interactions between individual decisions and the overall structure of the system when designing policies or systems. In conclusion, Braess's paradox provides a striking illustration of how individual self-interest can lead to suboptimal outcomes in networked systems. It shows that adding capacity to a network, such as new roads or routes, does not always lead to improved performance, and may, in fact, exacerbate congestion and inefficiency. The paradox underscores the need for careful consideration of user behavior and the potential for unintended consequences when designing infrastructure systems. It also highlights the importance of coordination, pricing mechanisms, and alternative strategies in addressing issues of congestion and efficiency in complex networks. As cities and societies continue to grapple with challenges related to transportation, communication, and other networked systems, understanding the implications of Braess's paradox will be essential for developing more effective solutions. The paradox of enrichment is a concept in ecology that illustrates a counterintuitive phenomenon in which increasing the resources available to an ecosystem or population can, in certain circumstances, lead to a decline in the population's health or the ecosystem's stability. Originally proposed by the American ecologist H.A. Hairston, the paradox challenges the assumption that enriching an ecosystem or providing more resources will always lead to a healthier, more thriving system. Instead, under certain conditions, increasing resource availability can destabilize the system and lead to negative consequences, including population crashes or ecosystem degradation. In the context of ecology, the paradox of enrichment primarily applies to predator-prey dynamics and food web interactions. Typically, ecosystems are structured around complex relationships between predators and prey, with each group playing a role in regulating the abundance of the other. In an ideal, balanced ecosystem, predators limit the population of prey, and the prey population, in turn, provides a food source for predators. These interactions often maintain a stable population size for both predators and prey, and the overall system operates efficiently. However, the paradox arises when an external factor, such as an increase in food availability for the prey population, enrichment, disrupts this balance. On the surface, providing more food to prey should lead to an increase in their population size, which would seem to benefit the predators who rely on the prey for sustenance. In the traditional view, greater prey availability would allow predators to thrive as well, potentially leading to a healthier ecosystem. However, the paradox of enrichment suggests that enriching the environment can sometimes destabilize this delicate balance, leading to unforeseen consequences. The paradox occurs because when the prey population increases due to higher resource availability, it may trigger a chain reaction within the ecosystem. Specifically, a higher prey population provides more food for predators, which can lead to an increase in the predator population. However, as the predator population grows, the rate of predation on the prey increases. This intensified predation can lead to a sharp decline in the prey population, potentially even causing it to crash. This phenomenon can destabilize the entire ecosystem, creating cycles of rapid population growth followed by crashes, which can be damaging to both predator and prey populations. One classic example of the paradox of enrichment can be observed in aquatic ecosystems. In a simplified model, consider a pond with a predator-prey relationship between fish and zooplankton. Zooplankton are the primary prey of fish, and the fish population is controlled by the availability of zooplankton. In a balanced system, if the zooplankton population increases slightly, the fish population may increase as well due to more food availability. However, if the amount of nutrients available in the pond is increased, enriching the environment, the zooplankton population may grow significantly, leading to a surge in the fish population as well. At first, this increase in fish might seem beneficial, but the rise in the fish population also leads to higher predation rates on the zooplankton. This intensified predation, combined with the fact that the zooplankton population cannot sustain the increased fish demand, leads to a decline in the zooplankton numbers. If the zooplankton population collapses, the fish will also suffer from a lack of food, leading to a crash in the predator population. In this case, the enriched environment, which was expected to improve the stability and health of the system, actually caused a destabilizing boom and bust cycle for both predator and prey. The paradox of enrichment can be understood in terms of the interactions between the two species and the feedback loops that develop within the ecosystem. In a system with strong feedback loops, an increase in one population can trigger a series of cascading effects throughout the ecosystem. When resources are plentiful, the prey population grows, which in turn attracts more predators. The increase in the predator population leads to increased predation, which may cause the prey population to decrease dramatically. Once the prey population declines, the predators may not have enough food to sustain their increased numbers, leading to a population crash. The ecosystem can oscillate between these phases of growth and decline, resulting in an overall decrease in stability and health. The paradox of enrichment has important implications for the management and conservation of ecosystems. It serves as a cautionary tale for those who seek to manipulate ecosystems by artificially increasing resource availability. While it may seem intuitive to assume that increasing food or resources will always benefit the species within the system, this paradox shows that such interventions can disrupt the natural balance and lead to negative consequences. In fact, the introduction of excessive nutrients into ecosystems, often referred to as eutrophication, can cause serious environmental issues such as algal blooms, hypoxia, oxygen depletion, and the collapse of aquatic ecosystems. The paradox of enrichment suggests that even well-intentioned efforts to enrich ecosystems may destabilize them and cause harm. This paradox also underscores the importance of maintaining biodiversity and the natural balance between different species. In systems where predators and prey interact in complex ways, the relationships between species are critical to maintaining stability. Introducing new resources or changing the availability of food can alter these relationships, leading to unintended outcomes. The lesson from the paradox of enrichment is that ecosystems are finely tuned, and small changes can have disproportionate and sometimes destructive effects. The concept of the paradox of enrichment is also relevant in agriculture, where the enrichment of soil through fertilizers or other means is used to increase crop yields. While these methods may increase food production in the short term, they can have long-term consequences for the ecosystem, such as soil depletion, water pollution, and loss of biodiversity. Similarly, the use of pesticides to control pest populations may lead to an increase in the pest-resistant species over time, which can result in an overall destabilization of the ecosystem and make pest control more difficult in the future. In the realm of population biology and evolutionary theory, the paradox of enrichment illustrates the complexity of predator-prey dynamics and the potential for unexpected outcomes in systems where species interact in nonlinear ways. The paradox suggests that populations may not always respond to changes in their environment in the ways that we expect. For example, evolutionary adaptations that make species better able to exploit new resources might also make them more vulnerable to the negative consequences of resource overabundance. The dynamics of population growth, competition, and resource use are complex, and simple interventions may not always produce the desired results. In conclusion, the paradox of enrichment highlights the complex and often counterintuitive nature of ecological systems. While it might seem logical to assume that increasing resources in an ecosystem will always lead to a healthier and more stable system, the paradox shows that, under certain conditions, enrichment can destabilize the system and lead to population crashes or ecological degradation. This phenomenon occurs because the interactions between species, such as predator-prey relationships, create feedback loops that can result in unintended consequences. The paradox of enrichment emphasizes the need for careful consideration of ecosystem dynamics when intervening in natural systems, whether in the context of conservation, agriculture, or other human activities. It serves as a reminder that ecological balance is fragile, and small changes can sometimes have large and unpredictable effects. The Easterlin Paradox is a concept in economics that challenges the assumption that increases in income lead to proportional increases in happiness or well-being. Named after the American economist Richard Easterlin, who first proposed it in 1974, the paradox suggests that while individuals may report higher levels of happiness when their income rises, there is no consistent correlation between a country's overall level of income and the happiness of its population over time. In other words, although people in wealthier countries tend to be happier than those in poorer countries, economic growth within a country does not necessarily lead to an increase in average happiness levels. The Easterlin Paradox emerged from a study of the relationship between income and happiness across both time and countries. Easterlin's research initially focused on cross-sectional data, comparing the happiness levels of people in different countries with their average income levels. His findings revealed a positive relationship. Wealthier nations tended to report higher levels of happiness. However, Easterlin also observed that within a given country, increases in income over time did not correspond to significant increases in the population's happiness. This counterintuitive observation led Easterlin to propose that, while income is an important factor in determining individual well-being, its effect diminishes as people's basic needs are met. For example, as individuals move from poverty to a middle income level, their happiness may increase significantly as they gain access to better living conditions, health care, and education. However, once a certain level of income is reached, further increases in income may have little to no impact on happiness, as people become accustomed to their material circumstances, a phenomenon known as the hedonic treadmill. The core insight of the Easterlin Paradox is the idea that happiness does not simply depend on an individual's or a society's absolute income level, but rather on relative income and social comparisons. People tend to evaluate their happiness not in absolute terms, but in relation to others. This relative comparison means that, while an individual may feel happier if their income increases relative to their peers, overall increases in national income may not result in greater happiness for the population as a whole, as people continuously compare themselves to others and adjust their expectations. Easterlin's paradox challenges the conventional economic assumption that material wealth and happiness are closely linked. This assumption is grounded in the idea that increasing income allows people to meet more of their desires and needs, leading to greater life satisfaction. The Easterlin Paradox, however, suggests that income is only one part of the equation, and that factors such as social relationships, health, work-life balance, and community engagement also play crucial roles in determining well-being. One of the key arguments in the Easterlin Paradox is that the relationship between income and happiness is nonlinear. While increases in income may lead to significant improvements in well-being at lower levels of income, the effect of income on happiness becomes weaker as income rises. This phenomenon is particularly evident in wealthier countries, where the marginal utility of income, the additional happiness derived from each additional dollar, diminishes once basic needs and desires are met. For example, a person moving from a low-income to a middle-income household may experience a large increase in happiness due to the improved quality of life, access to better health care, and enhanced opportunities. However, once a person's income is relatively high, such as in the case of someone in the top 1% of income earners, further increases in income have a much smaller effect on their overall happiness. The Easterlin Paradox also highlights the importance of relative income, or how an individual's income compares to that of others. People tend to compare themselves to those in their social circle or society, and these comparisons can have a significant impact on their perceived happiness. In a society where most people are relatively wealthy, a person who earns a higher income may feel more satisfied than someone with a lower income, but the effect of relative income is often more important than absolute income. This phenomenon is known as the relative income hypothesis, which suggests that people derive more satisfaction from their income relative to others than from their absolute income level. As a result, even if a country experiences overall economic growth, the happiness of individuals may not increase significantly if they continue to compare themselves to others who are also experiencing higher incomes. The paradox is also related to the concept of the hedonic treadmill, a theory that suggests that people quickly adapt to changes in their material circumstances and return to a baseline level of happiness. This theory explains why people who experience a rise in income may feel happier initially, but over time, their happiness returns to the same level it was before the increase in income. In other words, while people may temporarily feel happier after a pay raise or a new purchase, they soon adjust to the new level of wealth and begin seeking additional improvements to their material circumstances. The process of continually adapting to higher levels of income, while always striving for more, means that income alone is unlikely to provide lasting happiness or contentment. Critics of the Easterlin Paradox have argued that the relationship between income and happiness is more complex than the paradox suggests. Some have pointed out that the paradox may be explained by the fact that happiness is influenced by a wide range of factors, not just income. For example, people's happiness may also be determined by their health, social relationships, sense of purpose, and job satisfaction. Moreover, some studies have shown that individuals in wealthier countries report higher levels of happiness, even if the relationship between national income and individual happiness is not linear. This suggests that factors such as social security, access to health care, and other public services may play a significant role in contributing to happiness, regardless of income levels. In addition, more recent research has shown that income does play a role in subjective well-being, but its impact is often moderated by other factors. For example, studies have found that income is positively correlated with happiness, but only up to a certain point. After that threshold, additional income provides diminishing returns. This suggests that while the Easterlin Paradox raises important points about the limitations of income in contributing to happiness, it is not a complete rejection of the idea that wealth can affect well-being. Rather, it highlights the need to consider a broader range of factors that contribute to happiness and to focus on improving quality of life beyond just increasing income. The Easterlin Paradox has important implications for public policy and the pursuit of economic growth. If increasing income does not necessarily lead to greater happiness, then policymakers should consider focusing on other areas that can improve quality of life. These might include policies aimed at reducing income inequality, improving mental and physical health, fostering social connections, ensuring access to education, and creating a more sustainable and equitable economy. In particular, addressing the relative income differences within a society could help reduce the feelings of dissatisfaction that arise from social comparisons, and focus on creating environments where individuals can thrive regardless of their income. The paradox also suggests that happiness is a multidimensional concept that cannot be solely defined by material wealth. Policies aimed at increasing happiness should take into account a range of factors, including emotional well-being, work-life balance, relationships, and opportunities for personal growth. By broadening the focus beyond income growth and considering a more holistic approach to well-being, it may be possible to improve the quality of life for individuals and societies as a whole. In conclusion, the Easterlin Paradox provides a compelling challenge to the widely held belief that economic growth and increased income always lead to greater happiness. While income does play a role in determining happiness, its effects are limited by factors such as relative income, social comparisons, and individual adaptation. The paradox highlights the complex relationship between material wealth and well-being, and suggests that a broader approach to happiness is needed, one that includes factors such as health, relationships, and life satisfaction. By rethinking our understanding of happiness and focusing on more holistic measures of well-being, societies can work toward creating conditions that foster long-term fulfillment and contentment. The Allais Paradox is a concept in economics that highlights an apparent contradiction between theory and observed reality in the field of international capital flows. The paradox was named after the economist Robert Lucas, who introduced it in a seminal paper published in 1990. The Allais Paradox refers to the puzzling observation that, despite the predictions of economic theory, capital does not flow from wealthy countries to poorer countries in the way that one might expect. According to standard economic models, capital should flow from rich, capital-abundant countries to poor, capital-scarce countries, because the returns on investment are expected to be higher in the latter, due to the lower initial capital stock and greater opportunities for productive investment. However, in practice, the opposite is often observed. Capital tends to flow from poor countries to rich countries, or remains relatively stagnant in poorer economies. The Allais Paradox presents a challenge to the conventional wisdom in international economics, particularly the neoclassical growth theory. This theory suggests that capital should be allocated efficiently across borders based on differences in capital abundance and returns to investment. In theory, poor countries with less capital should experience higher marginal returns on investment, attracting capital from wealthier nations in search of higher returns. If capital markets were truly integrated and there were no barriers to investment, we would expect to see a large flow of capital from rich countries, where capital is abundant, to poor countries where capital is scarce. However, as Lucas observed, the empirical evidence does not support this prediction. In practice, capital flows are much smaller than would be predicted by the neoclassical model, and the capital stock in developing countries remains relatively low compared to developed countries. Instead of capital flowing to poorer nations, we often see the opposite trend. Capital flows are typically directed toward wealthier nations, especially those with well-established financial markets, stable political systems, and higher levels of human capital. This paradox has raised important questions about the functioning of global capital markets and the reasons behind the observed patterns of capital flows. To better understand the Allais Paradox, it is important to first examine the theory behind capital flows in a global economy. According to the neoclassical theory of growth, capital should flow to the regions where the marginal product of capital is highest, which is typically in poorer countries. The idea is that if a country has a lower stock of capital relative to its labor force, The return on additional capital invested in that country should be higher than in a country with a higher stock of capital. This leads to the prediction that, over time, capital will flow from rich countries to poor countries, leading to more investment in developing economies and a gradual narrowing of the income gap between rich and poor countries. In practice, however, this does not happen to the extent that the theory suggests. One of the key reasons behind this discrepancy is the role of human capital, which plays a crucial role in determining the productivity of capital. In rich countries, workers tend to have higher levels of education, better skills, and more experience, which allows them to use capital more effectively. In contrast, in poorer countries, the lack of human capital means that additional capital may not be used as efficiently. Even though the returns to capital may be higher in developing countries due to the relative scarcity of capital, the overall productivity of capital in these countries may be low because of the limited skills and education of the workforce. The problem of insufficient human capital in developing countries creates a situation where capital may not be as effective in driving economic growth as it would be in wealthier countries. This inefficiency in capital allocation helps explain why capital does not flow to poorer countries as predicted by the neoclassical model. Instead, capital tends to flow toward countries with well-developed infrastructure, skilled labor, and stable financial markets, where it is more likely to be used efficiently. Another important factor contributing to the Lucas paradox is the issue of risk. Investing in developing countries often comes with higher levels of risk compared to investing in wealthier countries. This risk can take many forms, including political instability, corruption, weak legal systems, and unpredictable economic conditions. These risks create a significant barrier to capital inflows into developing economies, as investors prefer to allocate their funds to more stable, low-risk environments. As a result, even though the potential returns in developing countries may be higher, the perceived risk of investing in these countries can deter capital from flowing there. Additionally, the Lucas paradox is related to the concept of capital flight, where capital that would otherwise be invested in developing countries is instead transferred to wealthier countries. This phenomenon occurs when investors or businesses in poor countries move their wealth abroad to safer, more profitable locations, often in response to political or economic instability at home. Capital flight can exacerbate the lack of investment in developing economies, further perpetuating the disparity in capital accumulation between rich and poor countries. The paradox also highlights the role of international financial markets and institutions in shaping global capital flows. While capital markets have become more integrated in recent decades, barriers to investment still exist in the form of regulatory restrictions, currency controls, and other trade barriers. These obstacles can prevent capital from flowing freely across borders, particularly to developing countries that may lack the infrastructure or institutional capacity to attract foreign investment. In some cases, foreign direct investment, FDI, may be directed toward countries with more favorable business environments, rather than countries with the highest potential returns. In addition to the barriers to capital flows, the Lucas paradox also points to the importance of economic policy and governance in shaping the flow of capital. Developing countries with weak institutions, poor governance, and ineffective economic policies may struggle to attract foreign investment, even if their potential returns are high. Without the right institutional framework in place to support investment, including strong property rights, transparent legal systems, and effective governance, capital will be less likely to flow into these countries, even if the economic potential is there. The paradox has important implications for the development of poorer countries. One of the key insights from the Lucas paradox is that increasing the availability of capital alone is unlikely to lead to sustained economic growth in developing countries. In order for capital to have the desired effect on economic development, it must be accompanied by improvements in human capital, infrastructure, governance, and institutions. Investments in education, healthcare, and the rule of law are critical to ensuring that capital is used efficiently and effectively in driving growth. Furthermore, the Allais Paradox underscores the importance of addressing the barriers to investment in developing countries, such as political risk, poor governance, and regulatory inefficiencies. Without addressing these issues, capital will continue to flow disproportionately toward wealthier nations, where the risks are lower and the returns are more predictable. By creating a more attractive investment environment through policy reforms and institutional improvements, developing countries can better attract the capital needed to fuel their economic growth. In conclusion, the Allais Paradox presents a significant challenge to traditional economic theories about international capital flows. While the neoclassical model predicts that capital should flow from rich countries to poor countries based on differences in capital abundance and returns, the reality is more complex. Factors such as human capital, risk, institutional quality, and economic policy play a crucial role in determining where capital is allocated. The paradox serves as a reminder that capital flows are not solely driven by economic fundamentals, but are influenced by a wide range of factors that shape the investment environment. Understanding these dynamics is crucial for policymakers who seek to promote economic development and attract investment to poorer countries. The Scitovsky Paradox is a concept in economics that deals with the relationship between consumer satisfaction, welfare, and income. Named after the Hungarian-American economist Tibor Scitovsky, the paradox explores a situation in which increases in income do not necessarily lead to greater overall happiness or well-being, and can, in some cases, even lead to a decrease in satisfaction. Scitovsky presented this paradox in his 1941 work, arguing that individuals might find greater happiness or satisfaction when they experience less income, rather than when they experience an increase in wealth. The paradox challenges the conventional assumption in economic theory that higher income always leads to a higher level of well-being, particularly when looking at welfare from a purely material or economic standpoint. According to traditional economic thought, as income increases, so should well-being, given that higher income typically allows individuals to purchase more goods and services, access better health care, and enjoy a higher standard of living. However, the Scitovsky Paradox calls this assumption into question, highlighting that, under certain circumstances, increased wealth might actually reduce happiness or life satisfaction. One of the central ideas behind the Scitovsky Paradox is that well-being is not solely determined by material wealth or the ability to consume more goods. Instead, Scitovsky argued that satisfaction is more complex and is influenced by the balance between one's desires and the satisfaction derived from achieving those desires. For example, the experience of pleasure or satisfaction is often higher when there is a sense of achievement or effort involved. As people's material circumstances improve, they may find themselves less challenged or less engaged in their day-to-day lives. This phenomenon, where people lose satisfaction as their income increases, is part of what makes the paradox so intriguing. The paradox can be illustrated by considering a typical consumer's experience. If a person has a modest income, they may be excited by the prospect of purchasing certain goods, such as a new car, house, or vacation. The sense of achievement and satisfaction they derive from these purchases, particularly when they have worked hard to afford them, is relatively high. However, once that person's income increases substantially, they may begin to take these purchases for granted. A new car or house may no longer provide the same level of satisfaction, as they have moved into a new income bracket and are now accustomed to a higher standard of living. The novelty of previous achievements wears off, and the pursuit of more wealth becomes less fulfilling. This diminishing satisfaction as income increases is a key feature of the Scitovsky Paradox. Scitovsky suggested that while wealth can provide a certain level of comfort and security, it can also reduce the sense of satisfaction derived from personal achievements or the pursuit of goals. In some cases, higher income may lead to a reduction in overall happiness, as individuals become less engaged or challenged in their daily lives. They may no longer derive satisfaction from the struggle or effort required to achieve certain goals, and instead may begin to feel a sense of dissatisfaction or boredom as their material needs are met. In addition to diminishing satisfaction with higher income, the Scitovsky Paradox also highlights the importance of the variety of experiences that people have in their lives. Scitovsky argued that people derive satisfaction not just from having more, but from the diversity and novelty of their experiences. When individuals experience an increase in wealth, they may be able to afford more goods and services, but they may also lose the novelty and excitement of these experiences. Over time, individuals may adapt to their new wealth and become less enthusiastic or engaged in their day-to-day lives, leading to a decrease in overall happiness. The concept of adaptation plays a central role in the Scitovsky Paradox. People often quickly adjust to changes in their material circumstances, whether it's a pay raise, a promotion, or a new purchase. This adaptation can lead to a phenomenon known as the hedonic treadmill, where people constantly strive for more wealth or more possessions, but never feel any more satisfied than they did before. As a result, the increase in income that was once expected to lead to greater happiness often does not produce the lasting effects that people anticipate. Once the novelty of increased wealth wears off, individuals return to their baseline level of happiness, and they may even experience a reduction in satisfaction if they no longer feel challenged or engaged in their lives. Another aspect of the Scitovsky Paradox is the role of social comparisons. People often compare their wealth and status to those around them, and this comparison can have a significant impact on their sense of satisfaction. If individuals' incomes rise, but they continue to compare themselves to wealthier individuals, their sense of satisfaction may not increase as expected. On the other hand, if their income increases in a relative sense, such as in comparison to their previous earnings or the earnings of their peers, they may experience greater satisfaction and happiness. The paradox thus suggests that it is not simply the amount of wealth that people have, but how that wealth compares to others, that influences their sense of well-being. One of the key implications of the Scitovsky Paradox is that economic growth and increases in income are not sufficient by themselves to ensure greater well-being or happiness. While higher income may provide more opportunities for consumption and comfort, it does not automatically lead to a more fulfilling or satisfying life. In fact, as people become wealthier, they may experience a decrease in satisfaction if they lose the sense of challenge, variety, or engagement that comes with striving for material goals. This observation suggests that policymakers and economists should focus not only on increasing income, but also on fostering a broader sense of well-being and life satisfaction among individuals. The Scitovsky Paradox also has important implications for the way we think about the distribution of wealth and income. If higher income leads to diminishing returns in terms of satisfaction, then policies aimed at reducing inequality or redistributing wealth may have positive effects on overall well-being, even if they do not directly increase overall income. For example, increasing access to education, healthcare, or other social services may have a greater impact on overall happiness than simply increasing individuals' disposable income. Policies that promote community engagement, social connections, and opportunities for personal growth may also be more effective in enhancing well-being than policies that focus exclusively on increasing material wealth. In addition to these broader implications, the Scitovsky Paradox challenges the traditional economic assumption that material wealth is the primary driver of happiness. It suggests that other factors such as personal fulfillment, relationships, and meaningful experiences are equally important in determining an individual's overall sense of well-being. As a result, increasing income or wealth is not necessarily the best way to improve people's lives or enhance their satisfaction. Instead, a more holistic approach to well-being, one that considers the non-material aspects of life, may be more effective in promoting long-term happiness. In conclusion, the Scitovsky Paradox offers a thought-provoking challenge to the conventional wisdom in economics regarding the relationship between income and well-being. While traditional economic theory suggests that higher income leads to greater satisfaction, the paradox reveals that this is not always the case. Increased income can, in some circumstances, reduce satisfaction if it leads to a loss of challenge, novelty, or engagement in life. The paradox underscores the importance of considering the broader dimensions of well-being, including personal fulfillment, social relationships, and meaningful experiences, rather than focusing solely on material wealth. By adopting a more nuanced understanding of happiness, policymakers and individuals can work toward creating lives that are not only wealthier, but also more satisfying and fulfilling. The Tullock Paradox is an intriguing concept in economics and political science that was named after the economist Gordon Tullock. The paradox revolves around the question of why individuals or organizations invest substantial resources into activities that appear to be economically inefficient, especially in the context of rent-seeking behavior. Rent-seeking refers to the practice of individuals, groups, or businesses seeking to increase their own wealth without creating new wealth, often by manipulating the political or economic environment. Rent-seeking activities can include lobbying for government, subsidies, tariffs, monopolies, or other regulations that benefit one group at the expense of others. Tullock introduced the paradox in 1967, and it refers to the unexpected inefficiency that arises from rent-seeking activities. The paradox can be understood by recognizing that while rent-seeking is designed to generate benefits for its participants, the resources spent on these activities are often much greater than the benefits that are ultimately received. In other words, the paradox arises when individuals or groups devote large amounts of time, money, and effort into securing government benefits, only to find that the returns from these activities are much smaller than the costs involved in obtaining them. At its core, the Tullock Paradox addresses a discrepancy between the efforts and costs associated with rent-seeking and the resulting benefits. While the goal of rent-seeking is to increase one's share of wealth or resources, the paradox suggests that these efforts often result in substantial inefficiency. Specifically, the resources expended in the rent-seeking process, such as time, money, and lobbying efforts, typically far exceed the actual economic gains that participants obtain. This situation creates an ironic outcome, in which the rent-seeking behavior leads to overall economic losses rather than the expected increases in wealth or utility. The paradox can be illustrated through the example of lobbying for government contracts or subsidies. Suppose a firm or industry lobbies the government for a specific benefit, such as a subsidy for a particular product or a protective tariff on imports. The goal of this lobbying is to secure a competitive advantage or to increase profits by reducing competition. However, the firm or industry often faces substantial competition from other groups seeking similar benefits. The lobbying efforts may involve significant resources, including hiring lobbyists, advertising, and engaging in political activities. Despite these efforts, the actual benefit the firm receives may be much smaller than the costs of securing it. For instance, if a firm spends $1 million on lobbying for a subsidy, and the subsidy itself is only worth $100,000, the firm has invested resources far beyond the benefit it receives. This example highlights the inefficiency inherent in rent-seeking activities and the Tullock Paradox. The firm has spent money and effort to obtain a benefit, but the return on that investment is much smaller than the costs incurred. Furthermore, this process may be repeated by many other firms or individuals competing for the same subsidy, leading to a situation where the aggregate cost of rent-seeking activities exceeds the total benefits to society. One of the most striking aspects of the Tullock Paradox is that, despite its inefficiency, rent-seeking behavior is widespread in both developed and developing countries. In many cases, the effort expended in rent-seeking activities is disproportionately high compared to the actual benefits that are achieved. This inefficiency is compounded by the fact that resources spent on rent-seeking activities are not used for productive purposes that could contribute to overall economic growth. Instead of investing in innovation, infrastructure, or human capital, rent-seeking groups direct their resources towards securing political or economic advantages. As a result, rent-seeking can lead to a misallocation of resources in the economy, preventing wealth from being created in more efficient ways. To better understand the Tullock Paradox, it is important to consider the motivations behind rent-seeking behavior. In many cases, individuals or groups engage in rent-seeking because the potential rewards can be substantial. The allure of government subsidies, tariffs, or regulatory advantages can create significant incentives to invest in political influence and lobbying. In certain industries, a small increase in market share or a minor advantage can lead to significant profits, making rent-seeking an attractive strategy for firms or individuals. However, the paradox lies in the fact that the total resources expended in pursuit of these advantages often outweigh the actual economic returns. The paradox also highlights the role of competition in the rent-seeking process. When multiple groups or individuals are vying for the same government benefit, the resources expended on lobbying and other rent-seeking activities tend to increase, as each group tries to outbid the others. This leads to a race for government benefits, where the overall cost of securing the benefit escalates. The more competition there is for a particular rent, the higher the cost of securing it, making the process increasingly inefficient. In the end, this competition may result in a situation where the costs of rent-seeking activities are so high that no one benefits, or where the benefit is so small in comparison to the costs that the entire process becomes economically irrational. The Tullock Paradox also underscores the importance of considering the broader economic and social impacts of rent-seeking behavior. While rent-seeking may lead to individual or group benefits, it can have negative consequences for society as a whole. By diverting resources away from productive uses, rent-seeking can hinder economic growth, reduce overall welfare, and create inefficiencies in the allocation of resources. In extreme cases, the rent-seeking behavior can lead to regulatory capture, where industries or firms gain undue influence over government policies, resulting in regulations that favor special interests rather than the public good. The Tullock Paradox can be applied to a variety of real-world scenarios. One example is the issue of agricultural subsidies in many countries. Agricultural groups often lobby governments for subsidies or protectionist policies that support their industries. While these subsidies may provide short-term benefits to the agricultural sector, the overall economic costs of such policies can be quite high. These subsidies often lead to inefficiencies in the agricultural market, distort competition, and create unnecessary costs for taxpayers. Furthermore, the resources spent on lobbying and political influence could have been better used to invest in technological innovation or improvements in productivity. Another example of the Tullock Paradox can be seen in the defense industry. Firms in the defense sector often engage in lobbying efforts to secure government contracts or to influence defense spending. The resources spent on these lobbying efforts may be substantial, but the actual benefits of securing a government contract may be much smaller in comparison. The overall economic cost of these lobbying activities, including the potential for regulatory capture, can create inefficiencies in the allocation of resources in the defense sector and in the broader economy. The Tullock Paradox also has implications for understanding the political process itself. In many democracies, rent-seeking behavior is an inherent part of the political system. Interest groups and political actors often engage in rent-seeking to secure benefits for their constituencies. While this process can lead to short-term gains for specific groups, it can also create long-term inefficiencies and distortions in the political and economic system. The paradox suggests that political institutions may need to be reformed to reduce the incentives for rent-seeking and to promote policies that encourage more productive uses of resources. In conclusion, the Tullock Paradox offers valuable insights into the inefficiencies and contradictions of rent-seeking behavior. While rent-seeking is driven by the desire to secure economic benefits, the paradox reveals that the costs of engaging in rent-seeking activities often outweigh the actual benefits received. This inefficiency can lead to a misallocation of resources, hinder economic growth, and create negative externalities for society. Understanding the Tullock Paradox is crucial for policymakers, as it emphasizes the need to address rent-seeking behavior and reform political and economic systems to promote more efficient and productive outcomes. Borel's paradox is a fascinating concept in the field of probability theory, named after the French mathematician Émile Borel. It is an intriguing example of a paradox in the interpretation of probability and random events, highlighting some of the complexities and counterintuitive results that can arise when dealing with infinite sets and probability distributions. The paradox challenges our intuitions about the nature of randomness and probability, particularly in situations involving infinite outcomes and measure theory. At the core of Borel's paradox is a situation in which a seemingly logical approach to assigning probabilities leads to an outcome that is both paradoxical and counterintuitive. The paradox involves the concept of assigning probabilities to events in a continuous probability space, which is a space where outcomes are infinite and densely packed. One of the key lessons of the paradox is that in such spaces, certain intuitive ideas about probability and likelihood can break down in unexpected ways, often leading to paradoxical results. Borel's paradox arises when we attempt to assign probabilities to certain events in a scenario involving continuous distributions. The paradox is typically framed in the context of choosing a random point on a plane, where the probability distribution used is uniform and continuous. However, the paradox can be applied to many other contexts in probability theory that involve infinite outcomes. The essence of the paradox is that two different ways of partitioning the space can yield two different probability assignments for the same event, even though the event itself remains unchanged. This discrepancy arises because of the way in which infinite sets and continuous probability distributions are handled. The simplest version of Borel's paradox involves the concept of choosing a point on a disk or a circle. Suppose you have a uniform probability distribution on a disk, meaning that any point within the disk is equally likely to be chosen. Now, imagine dividing the disk into a series of smaller regions, such as dividing the disk into circular sectors. Each sector would have an equal probability of being selected if a point is chosen randomly. The paradox emerges when we examine the probabilities of selecting certain sectors from different perspectives. One example involves considering a continuous probability space where the probability of choosing a point in a specific sector of the disk is proportional to the area of that sector. However, if we change the way we partition the disk, say by considering different ways of dividing the disk or using a different method of assigning probabilities, the resulting probability distribution can yield different probabilities for the same event. This leads to a paradoxical situation where the probabilities seem to contradict each other, even though they are being calculated in entirely reasonable ways based on the underlying probability theory. The heart of Borel's paradox lies in the concept of non-measurable sets, which are sets that cannot be assigned a meaningful probability in the context of standard probability theory. In continuous probability spaces, certain sets may be non-measurable, meaning they do not have a well-defined probability according to traditional methods. The paradox arises because these non-measurable sets can sometimes appear in situations where we would intuitively expect a well-defined probability distribution to apply. When we encounter such non-measurable sets, it becomes impossible to assign a single, consistent probability to an event, leading to the paradoxical results. The paradox can be illustrated more clearly through a famous thought experiment often attributed to Borel. Imagine you are asked to choose a random point from a region of the plane, such as a square or a disk. The question is then posed: what is the probability that the point you choose will lie inside a particular subset of the plane, such as a circle, square, or any other geometric shape? Under the assumption of a uniform probability distribution, we might expect that the probability of selecting a point in any particular shape would be proportional to the area of that shape. However, this assumption breaks down in certain cases where the probability distributions do not behave as expected due to the presence of non-measurable sets. For example, in one version of the paradox, if you divide a disk into infinitely many smaller pieces in a certain way, it is possible to assign probabilities to each of these pieces. However, when you attempt to recombine these pieces in different ways, the probabilities can conflict with one another. In some cases, it may even be possible to assign a probability of 1, certainty, to an event occurring, while simultaneously assigning a probability of 0, impossibility, to the same event, depending on how the space is partitioned. This is a direct consequence of the properties of continuous probability distributions and the challenges posed by infinite sets. Borel's paradox demonstrates some of the difficulties inherent in working with infinite spaces and non-measurable sets. In finite probability spaces, assigning probabilities is relatively straightforward because there is a limited number of possible outcomes, and the probabilities can be easily normalized. However, in continuous spaces, such as those that involve infinite points or continuous variables, the situation becomes much more complex. So the paradox highlights the challenges of assigning meaningful probabilities to events in such spaces, and the possibility that different methods of partitioning or measuring the space can lead to seemingly contradictory results. The paradox also underscores the importance of understanding the mathematical tools used to handle infinite sets and continuous spaces. In particular, the concept of measure theory plays a critical role in understanding and resolving the paradox. Measure theory provides a formal framework for dealing with probability spaces, including infinite and continuous spaces, and for defining the probabilities of events in such spaces. One of the central contributions of measure theory is the notion of a measure, which is a way of assigning a value to the size or probability of a set. In the context of Borel's paradox, the measure theory framework can help clarify why certain events cannot be assigned probabilities in the traditional sense, and why the paradox arises in the first place. In practical terms, Borel's paradox highlights the limitations of intuition when it comes to continuous probability distributions. While we may intuitively expect that certain events should have well-defined probabilities, the complexities of infinite sets in measure theory can lead to counterintuitive results. The paradox is a reminder that our intuitions about randomness and probability may not always align with the mathematical reality, especially when dealing with continuous or infinite spaces. It also illustrates the importance of carefully considering the underlying assumptions and methods used in probability theory, particularly when dealing with non-measurable sets or continuous distributions. The Tullock Paradox, which we have explored in earlier discussions, is another example of how seemingly rational behavior can lead to inefficient or unexpected outcomes. Similarly, Borel's paradox is a reminder that mathematical and probabilistic reasoning can sometimes lead to surprising or paradoxical results, particularly when dealing with infinite or continuous sets. While both paradoxes highlight different aspects of human behavior and mathematical theory, they share a common theme of challenging our intuitive assumptions and requiring us to reconsider how we understand and apply probability. In conclusion, Borel's paradox serves as an important reminder of the complexities and counterintuitive nature of probability theory. It illustrates the difficulties that arise when working with continuous probability spaces and non-measurable sets, and it challenges our intuitions about randomness and likelihood. The paradox emphasizes the need for rigorous mathematical frameworks, such as measure theory, to handle such problems effectively, and to ensure that our understanding of probability is grounded in sound mathematical principles. By examining paradoxes like Borel's, we gain valuable insights into the nature of randomness and the intricacies of probability theory, deepening our understanding of how these concepts apply to real-world situations. The Monty Hall Paradox is a famous probability puzzle based on a game show scenario. The paradox is named after Monty Hall, the host of the American television game show Let's Make a Deal. The problem involves a seemingly counterintuitive result regarding probability, where participants are asked to choose between switching or not switching doors after a host reveals some information about the outcome. It is a striking example of how human intuition about probability can be misleading, and it illustrates the importance of carefully considering all possible outcomes and probabilities in a situation. The Monty Hall Paradox is typically framed as follows. Imagine you are a contestant on a game show. You are presented with 3 closed doors: Door A, Door B, and Door C. Behind one of the doors is a car, which is the prize you want to win, and behind the other 2 doors are goats. You are told that one of the doors has the car, and the other 2 have goats. After you make your initial choice, the host, Monty Hall, who knows what is behind each door, opens one of the other 2 doors, revealing a goat. Monty then gives you the option to either stick with your original choice or switch to the remaining closed door. What should you do to maximize your chances of winning the car? Stick with your initial choice or switch doors? At first glance, it might seem that switching or staying should not affect your chances, and that your odds of winning should always be 50-50 after Monty reveals a goat behind one of the remaining doors. However, a careful analysis of the probabilities reveals that the best strategy is, in fact, to always switch doors. This result is the core of the Monty Hall Paradox, and it runs counter to many people's intuitive reasoning. To understand why switching is the better strategy, let's break down the problem step by step. 1. When you first pick a door, there is a 1 in 3 chance, approximately 33.33%, that you have selected the door with the car behind it, and a 2 in 3 chance, approximately 66.67%, that you have selected a door with a goat behind it. This is the starting point for the probability distribution. 2. After you make your initial choice, Monty, who knows the locations of the car and the goats, opens one of the remaining doors to reveal a goat. Monty always knows which door to open, and he will never reveal the car. At this point, you are left with 2 doors, your original choice and the other unopened door. Since Monty's reveal does not change the probability of your initial choice, the key to understanding the paradox lies in realizing that Monty's action provides you with additional information. 3. If you originally picked the car, which happens with a probability of 1 in 3, Monty will reveal a goat behind one of the other doors, and switching would make you lose. However, if you initially picked a goat, which happens with a probability of 2 in 3, Monty will reveal the other goat, and switching will lead you to the car. Therefore, by switching, you will win the car 2 out of 3 times, while sticking with your original choice will win you the car only 1 out of 3 times. Let's revisit the key probabilities involved in the Monty Hall problem to further explain why switching is the optimal strategy. When you first choose a door, you have a 1 in 3 chance of picking the car and a 2 in 3 chance of picking a goat. Monty will always reveal a goat behind one of the other 2 doors, and he will never open the door you selected, revealing the car. If you initially picked the car, Monty can open either of the other doors, since both contain goats. If you initially picked a goat, Monty will be forced to open the door that contains the other goat. If you switch, you win if you originally picked a goat, which happens with a probability of 2 in 3. If you stick with your original choice, you win only if you initially picked the car, which happens with a probability of 1 in 3. Thus, by switching, you effectively double your chances of winning from 1 in 3 to 2 in 3. This makes switching the statistically advantageous choice, even though many people intuitively think that the odds should be 50-50 after Monty reveals a goat. The Monty Hall Paradox is so perplexing because it challenges our natural intuitions about probability. At first glance, many people believe that once Monty has revealed a goat behind one of the other doors, the game has effectively become a 50-50 situation. After all, there are 2 remaining doors, one with a car and one with a goat, so it seems like the odds of winning should be the same no matter what. However, this intuition is mistaken. The key to the paradox lies in the fact that Monty's actions provide important information about the game, and this information changes the probabilities. By revealing a goat, Monty has effectively provided you with a clue that alters the odds in your favor if you choose to switch. The probabilities of your initial choice remain 1 in 3 for the car and 2 in 3 for a goat, even after Monty reveals a goat. Switching takes advantage of this revised probability distribution and gives you a better chance of winning. The reason the Monty Hall Paradox works this way can be understood by recognizing that Monty's actions eliminate one of the possible losing choices, making it more likely that the remaining door contains the car. The game is not just about selecting between 2 doors after Monty's reveal. It is about updating the probability distribution based on the additional information Monty gives you. To better understand this, imagine a simulation where you play the Monty Hall game many times. If you always switch doors, you will win approximately 2 out of every 3 games. If you always stick with your initial choice, you will win about 1 out of every 3 games. This statistical outcome confirms the advantage of switching. A critical aspect of the Monty-Hall paradox is Monty's knowledge of what is behind each door. If Monty were to open a door randomly, rather than deliberately revealing a goat, the situation would change. In that case, the probability of winning by switching would be 50-50, because Monty's reveal would not provide any additional information. Monty's intentional action of always revealing a goat is what leads to the paradoxical outcome where switching doors is the optimal strategy. While the Monty-Hall paradox is a fun and counterintuitive puzzle, it has important real-world implications in fields such as decision theory, risk analysis, and game theory. The paradox teaches us the value of carefully considering all available information when making decisions, especially in situations that involve uncertainty or incomplete knowledge. It also emphasizes the importance of updating our beliefs and strategies based on new information, rather than relying solely on initial assumptions or intuition. For example, in real-world decision-making scenarios, the Monty-Hall paradox shows how an initial decision may be based on limited information, and how additional information can shift the odds in unexpected ways. It also underscores the importance of being open to changing our approach if new evidence or insights arise, rather than sticking stubbornly to an initial choice. The Monty-Hall paradox is a fascinating and counterintuitive puzzle that demonstrates how human intuition can often be at odds with the laws of probability. The paradox shows that in the game show scenario, switching doors doubles your chances of winning from 1 in 3 to 2 in 3, making it the optimal strategy. This outcome is due to the information provided by Monty's actions, which effectively updates the probability distribution of the possible outcomes. The Monty-Hall paradox is not only an intriguing example of probability theory, but it also offers valuable insights into decision-making, the importance of information in shaping outcomes, and the need to carefully evaluate probabilities in uncertain situations. Goodman's paradox, formulated by philosopher Nelson Goodman in his 1955 book, Fact, Fiction, and Forecast, presents a fundamental challenge in the philosophy of science and epistemology. The paradox highlights the problem of inductive reasoning by introducing the concept of projectable predicates, questioning how we justify our belief that certain generalizations are more valid than others. It is a modern take on the problem of induction first articulated by David Hume, but it complicates the issue further by showing that our usual ways of making predictions about the future are not as straightforward as they seem. To illustrate the paradox, Goodman introduces a thought experiment involving the predicates green and grew. He defines grew as an object that is green before a certain future time, say January 1st, 2100, but blue thereafter. Suppose that every emerald observed before this date has been green. By the usual principles of induction, one might predict that all future emeralds will also be green. However, using the same observations, one could also argue that all future emeralds will be grew, meaning that they will appear blue after the specified date. Since both hypotheses are equally supported by past observations, the paradox challenges our assumption that green is a more natural or valid predicate than grew. The paradox raises a crucial question. What makes green a legitimate projectable predicate while grew is not? Intuitively, green seems like a normal, unproblematic concept, while grew appears artificial and contrived. But Goodman points out that this intuition alone is not enough. we need a formal way to distinguish between valid and invalid predicates in inductive reasoning. This problem has significant implications for scientific practice, where we constantly rely on induction to formulate laws and theories. One possible response to the paradox is that GRU is defined in terms of a temporal condition, making it an inherently unnatural predicate. However, Goodman counters this by showing that green could be similarly redefined in terms of GRU and blue from a different linguistic perspective. If we were in a world where GRU was the fundamental concept, then green would be the predicate requiring special explanation. This symmetry suggests that there is no purely objective reason why we prefer one over the other. Our preference for green over GRU is a matter of linguistic convention and past practice rather than logical necessity. Goodman's solution to the paradox is his theory of entrenchment. He argues that the distinction between projectable and non-projectable predicates depends on their history of successful use in inductive reasoning. Green is projectable because it has been entrenched in our scientific and linguistic practices, whereas GRU is not. This concept of entrenchment implies that our inductive reasoning is shaped by conventions and past successes rather than by any inherent naturalness of certain predicates. The implications of Goodman's paradox extend beyond philosophy and into scientific methodology. It raises concerns about how we justify our inductive generalizations, given that alternative, equally consistent but non-standard generalizations always exist. If our choice of predicates is guided by past practice rather than objective criteria, this suggests that scientific laws may be more about pragmatism and historical success than about discovering fundamental truths of nature. Some philosophers and scientists find this troubling because it suggests that our scientific theories might be more contingent than we typically assume. Goodman's paradox has led to various responses and debates in the philosophy of science. One influential response comes from Karl Popper, who rejects induction altogether in favor of falsifiability. Popper argues that science does not work by confirming generalizations through past observations, but by actively trying to falsify hypotheses. If a hypothesis survives repeated attempts at falsification, it is tentatively accepted, but it is never confirmed in the way traditional inductive reasoning suggests. However, this does not completely resolve Goodman's problem, because even in falsification we still rely on projectable predicates to determine what counts as a valid test of a hypothesis. Another response comes from Bayesian epistemology, which suggests that we should evaluate hypotheses probabilistically based on prior beliefs and evidence. Bayesianism offers a framework where certain predicates become more probable over time due to their coherence with past observations and expectations. While this approach provides a mathematical way to handle the problem, it still relies on initial assumptions about which predicates are reasonable, meaning that Goodman's challenge is not entirely bypassed. Some have also attempted to resolve the paradox through cognitive science and psychology. Research on human perception and language suggests that our preference for predicates like green over GRU is tied to the way we categorize the world based on evolutionary and neurological constraints. Our brains are wired to recognize and track stable properties of objects, and green corresponds to a stable color property under normal lighting conditions, whereas GRU involves an unnatural time-dependent transformation. This perspective implies that our inductive habits are shaped not just by convention, but also by cognitive structures that favor certain kinds of generalizations. Despite these responses, Goodman's paradox remains an open problem in the philosophy of science. It forces us to confront the limitations of inductive reasoning and to question the foundations of our knowledge. If we cannot find an objective way to determine which predicates are valid for induction, then we must accept that scientific reasoning is at least partially shaped by historical, linguistic, and psychological factors. This does not necessarily undermine the reliability of science, but it does mean that our theories are not purely dictated by the structure of reality itself. They are also influenced by how we, as humans, conceptualize and interact with the world. Goodman's paradox also has implications beyond science. It applies to any domain where prediction and classification are important, including artificial intelligence, economics, and law. In machine learning, for example, models rely on past data to make predictions about the future. If the choice of features, analogous to predicates, is misguided or arbitrary, the model's predictions may be flawed. Understanding what makes some features more projectable than others is crucial for improving AI decision-making. Similarly, in law, legal precedents function as a form of inductive reasoning, and the way we classify and apply past cases influences the outcomes of future legal decisions. In summary, Goodman's paradox challenges our assumptions about induction and forces us to rethink how we justify generalizations. It reveals that our reliance on certain predicates is not purely a matter of logical necessity, but is influenced by history, convention, cognition, and practicality. While various responses, such as entrenchment, falsifiability, Bayesian reasoning, and cognitive science, offer partial solutions, the paradox remains a central issue in epistemology and the philosophy of science. It serves as a reminder that even our most fundamental reasoning processes are not immune to philosophical scrutiny, and that the search for objective criteria in science and knowledge continues to be an ongoing endeavor.